May the words of my mouth and the meditation of mine heart be acceptable in your sight. He is our strength and our Redeemer, and it is in His name, which is His authority, that we pray, praise, proclaim, project, and protect today's message, Aman. Hola, mi nombre es Kofi, ¿cómo está? Bonjour, je m'appelle Kofi, ça va? Ni hao, namaste, Osayene Kitawaya, Ohio. I see you, Manut, Wagwan, Kamsa, Kamsamida, Aloha, Ciao, Onson, uh, uh, Privet, Habarigani, Aquaba, Madase, etc. Jambo, Bimidi Kofi, the fried Kukutana the Wewe, um, Boker Tov, Boker Tav, greetings, grand rising salutations, um, Yam, Yam Chi, or Yam Cha, Chevanakach, Shalom, peace, blessings, happy Hanukkah to all. I am Pastor Kofi, Pastor Servant to Christ, where we are always changing lives one mind at a time by being a voice of the voiceless and speaking the unspoken. Tada, thank you for your presence. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your support. Thank you for rolling and rocking with us as we continue in this series called Reversing the Curse, means revisiting the lie. And thank you for those who were with us last night as we started our Galatians series. Once again, we give all honor and praise to the Most High. We give all praise and honor to Him for my wife, the Honorable Maya, who lives a life that is able to be honored. As always, you can check her out on TikTok, YouTube, her website, and Pinterest at Bloom and Flourish. Not A-N-D, the letter N, Bloom and Flourish. She is a healer, herbalist, chemist, and biologist by degree, to the ministerial staff, moderators, SOC family, SOC adjacent, first time listening, long time listening, first time in a long time coming back, whatever the case is, across all the different platforms around the world. We're thankful and grateful for another opportunity to be in front of you one more again. I was actually hoping that we were going to go outside today, but I saw the weather yesterday, and the weather did keep its promise, at least the promise of man, and it is extremely rainy and windy where I am, so we're going to stay put yet another day. That being said, hopefully everybody's staying well, staying warm. If you're like me, is struggling this season to be paying some of these bills and stuff or whatever. But that being said, the Most High is still great. He's awesome, and He's amazing, and we're going to continue to soldier on. Prayerfully, you guys are doing well where you are, and praying for you. We're trying to help as much as we can. Obviously, we live by such as we have, we give unto Thee. So we hope to be able to be a little better in our giving and our help and stuff like that for those who are not able to do whatever they're going through. So keep us in prayer. We'll keep you in prayer. Our goal is to continue to be able to do exactly what we're doing now for years, and we're thankful to the Most High for that. And we stand on business on that. Some quick announcements before we get ready to go into today's Q&A session. It is Q&A once again, so feel free to whatever questions, comments, or concerns you guys have. We're gonna let you guys, take the wheel, so to speak. So feel free to be ready to give whatever questions, comments, concerns that you have regarding anything really, whether it be the series, once again called Reversing the Curse, means visiting the lie, or whether it's just topics that are in everyday life. We're going to come through the prism. We're going to come through the prism and look through the prism of the Word and the Kingdom. And so we hope that you're ready for that. Announcement for today. We do have some stuff doing tomorrow. Let's not forget about tomorrow's watch party and tomorrow's men's meeting. That being said, tonight it is Friday. And so we're going to continue to build, or the sisters shall continue to build on what they've been building, which is the women's meetings. So prayerfully you'll be on at 7 p.m. New York time with Elder Maya tonight and others. And prayerfully you'll be ready to receive your just information of the text train and all that stuff. We will be updating all these text trains and everything once a month. So come next year, we'll be ready to update everything, hopefully including even our website and everything of that nature as well. Prayerfully, everybody who's sent donations and all that have been waiting, I think everybody should have the virtual calendar, and we'll try to make sure we get those physical calendars out as soon as we can in January. Prayerfully, everybody's gotten those. Prayerfully, everybody's been supporting. We got books out by Elder Anais. I still haven't finished, the presentation of mine. That's pretty much what we're waiting on, but we have Elder Anais' book that's out. We have Sister Carla's book that's out. We have clothing, of course, with Brother Jermaine. We have food and everything, actually something that SOC will hopefully be able to provide soon as well. We have persons who can help if you're in need of food during these times and during these struggles. If you let us know, even if we can't take care of it, we can definitely, in a lot of places that we are around the world, we can point you in the right direction. Um, so all these different things going on. I know this is struggle time for us as a family. This is always, these from like the end of Feast of Tabernacles really until like the end of January for us is time where we kind of go through some things. We've had some things happen personally in our lives that has really hit us and is causing us to go through some things as well. So we're all together. We're praying, but Yah provides all our needs according to His riches and glory. And so we're going to fall on that word and stand really on that word. So we're thankful. We're grateful. We know that Yah is blessing us and all those different things. So we're going to try and keep persons in our prayer. We ask that you continue to keep Sister Arshel in your prayers, Minister Moselle and her family in your prayers, Minister Akita and her family in your prayers, Sister Donna and her family in your prayers, and many others that are going through many different things. So we thank you all. We appreciate you. We honor your time today. We're grateful and thankful for you guys being on with us today. All right. In Zimmerman. Okay. Wow. Pause. That's what you came on here with. Wow. All righty. I mean, you just let's go ahead and get you out of here. That's all you got on your mind, that you want persons to do that on your face. Man, my greatness. Well, we speak against speak against that foolishness. We pray that your heart get right. But you got to get out. We went ahead and reported you and got you out of here. Thank you, moderators. All right, so let's go ahead. We're going to get ready to rise to our feet. Once again, it's Q&A day, so whatever, or Q&A day part 2. Every other Thursday and Friday, we do Q&A. So we're ready to go on that. And I'm thankful and grateful to everybody being on one more again. Let's go ahead and get ready to get started. And get ready to say our Bible pledge. If you're able to rise to your feet in reverence of Yahweh's word, or however you are able to reverence the word of Yah, we ask that you get ready to do so at this moment as we get ready for our Bible pledge. And as we're doing that, let's go ahead and say shalom and peace to everybody. Happy Hanukkah once again to all parties, everybody listening. If you do, in fact, celebrate it and celebrate it correctly. All right, but how you doing, Sister Carla? How you doing, Sister Tamika? How you doing, Minister Moselle? How you doing, Minister Samaela Ray? Oh, please keep Minister Samaela Ray and her family in your prayers as well. Excuse me. How you doing? Let's see, Sister Beck, Cultural Prospect. I apologize. I feel like I missed somebody over here. Brother Keith, Baruch. All right, thank you so much to everybody on all the platforms. Thank you so much. How you doing? How you doing, Sister Shirley? How you doing, Minister Morel? Brother Charles, Double OG, Triple OG. How you doing, Brother Cole? Upper Echelon, thanks for being part of the community. Jacob's Link. Also, too, check out Jacob's Regeneration. You can get in touch with him at jacobsregeneration@gmail.com for some of the stuff we've been talking about. Also, too, check out some of the stuff that he's doing online, providing healthy alternatives in life. Brother Jacob, I just realized, I think I have the picture. I probably got it in my text message where it's unsent. But we did get the stuff. I sent a picture of it. The packaging was like immaculate and much appreciated. So thank you so much. Been using it pretty much since I got here. I meant to reach out to you, so I apologize. I don't know if I'm honest. I don't know if I sent your secretary thanks or not, but I meant to text you or whatever. Just keep doing what you're doing, little bruh or big bruh. I don't even know I think I'm older. I'm not sure. We're about the same age, right? but just keep on pushing, man. I'm to be honest, personal walk is we put it in y'all's hands. Still going through some things, but just know that it's appreciated, man. You are appreciated, and you are a light, and little things like that that you do. Probably not just, obviously not just for us, but around the world. Like, keep on pushing, man. You're doing a great work, and love you, bro. How you doing, Charles? How you doing, Huma? How you doing, user 429? Is it? I don't know if I can even say that word. Sorry. Is it Dice as well? Sister Shirley, I might have said your name already. Akudarach. And if I miss anybody, charge it to my head, not to my heart. Is there sound? Can you guys hear me and see me? Somebody said they can't hear me. Can you hear and see me? Yes, no, maybe so. Yes, no, maybe so. How you doing, Brother Rodney? Everybody here and see me all right? I think so. Okay, we've been having some issues. Oh, you know what? For them, with all this rain, we got to put them on a different signal. Okay. All right. Hopefully it's better. I just realized the signal, it might be in and out, in and out, in and out. I just realized we didn't have you guys on proper signal. We are going through extreme wind and rain, and towers and stuff have even been pushed over. So my bad. So it should be better. Hopefully you hear me better. How you doing, Big Roy? Thank y'all to love. Oh, okay, yeah. We're dealing with something very similar over here, Sister Deborah. So please don't feel any kind of way about it. Matter of fact, we're hoping that you're okay. Um, we've had some issues over here, so I forgot. I've actually am down a little bit on what I usually would have to bounce stuff off of when they make our stuff, go all over the place. So, and we're in one place. One of the great things about it is even when they try to suppress your numbers when you're traveling on the road or you're going to a different place each time, it's difficult for them to pinpoint you. So it takes a minute. By then, algorithm kind of works against this stuff they're trying to use the algorithm for. But when you're in one place each time, it actually gets easier for them. So I thank you guys for finding us. Even last night, we had a really great turnout, believe it or not, when you might consider some of that stuff to be low numbers. The fact that you guys showed out the way that you did, because they did not basically share it with anybody who doesn't normally come on. So those of you who actually were looking for us and found us and made sure that you came out and supported, I appreciate that, because they made it a point to be, they make it a point that they are really in this season right now trying to keep the numbers down. So I appreciate you. And thank you for finding us in any way, shape, or form at any time, recordings. If you come in and you're new to this, hey man, thank you. And feel free to like, to share, subscribe, hit the notification tab, repost, let persons know that we're on. Thank you for all the stuff you guys do in front of the scenes, behind the scenes, donations that you give, not only to SOC as a whole, but even if I be honest, to my family, if it's not for a lot of you right now, especially in the season of my life, still reeling from some of the stuff, just trying to bury somebody. You guys know how expensive that can be and stuff. If it's not for you all, a lot of stuff, that we need, praise. So I praise Yah for you all. I really do. All right. Let's go ahead and get started for the day. Let's go ahead and get in. Let's go ahead and get this in here. Alrighty. So we'll go ahead and say our Bible pledge once again. If you're able to rise your feet in reverence of Yahweh's word, or however you are able to reverence the word of Yah, we thank you for doing so in advance. Let's go ahead and get ready to say our Bible pledge, and we shall jump in. Once again, it's Q&A day, so we're looking for questions, comments, or concerns that you guys have. Wherever you guys take us, we'll try to go in that direction. Come on. Once again, sisters, don't forget about women's meeting tonight, 7 p.m. New York time. All right, let's go ahead and say our Bible pledge. You can just repeat after me. This is my Bible. This is my sword. In this will I trust. For Yahshua is Lord. No sword of God shall ever be heard. For this is my Bible, and this is Yah's word. Hashem Yechavach. Aman. His name is authority. Let it be done unto us. You may be seated to go back to what you were doing in the presence of the Most High Yah. How you doing, Brother Josh? Hopefully you guys over there at Wisconsin, right? Hopefully you guys are doing all right over there as well. Glad to see you on. Thank you for being on with us. Keep brother starts. I swear, sometimes my mind is not where it needs to be. I feel like the name starts with an A. I don't know. It'll come to me. I'm sorry. There's so many of us sometimes. But when it comes to me, there's one other brother I'd like for you guys to lift up his name in particular. Brother Aaron. That's it. Brother Aaron. Please keep Brother Aaron in your prayers as well. And his family. Alrighty. Okay. All right. So today's Q&A. Whatever questions, comments, or concerns you guys have, let's Brother Aaron. Yep. So whatever questions, comments, or concerns that you guys have, let's go. Let's get it. It's all on you. Right? I have some stuff that I can start off with as usual, but I'm not going to just start. This is Q&A, so it's supposed to be for you all and wherever you guys want to take it. So let's look at it through different prisms. I feel like somebody asked something yesterday that I couldn't really dig deep into, but I don't recall exactly what it was. How you doing, Sister Danielle? Praise Yah. Hopefully all was well and travel, getting to and from work and all that stuff. Being diligent. Thank you. So what's the main summation or difference between the old and the new covenant. So, so it's tricky language. It's hard to get into, and so that's a great deep question to get us into, brother Jacob. All right, I love you, sir. Um, put me on blast. No, I'm just playing, of course. That's a great question. So I'm trying to figure out, is there a shorter way of answering it? And I don't know if there is, but that's not what we come on here for, right? So we gonna do what we do, right? Um, so yeah, so the whole thing is wow, yeah, great question. So we've kind of answered this before, but I don't know if anybody just kind of, that's a very direct way of asking it, which means that there's a lot of stuff that I have to now like kind of sift through because you know how my brain works. But I would start here that our mindset as far as testament or covenant is not necessarily biblical as far as original Bible, right? So, and you know this already, but this for not just one person's for all, right? But I promise I'm gonna get to you and tell you the core essence of your question, right? So I would start here to make it a point to where somebody says like, what's the difference between the Old Testament and New Testament, right? You said, why has history changed every decade? We can get into that next too. Kind of is gonna go along with it, but they go hand in hand. Great second question. So if we're talking about testament and covenant, right? This whole thought process of an Old Testament and New Testament had to be written in your Bible because they change, this, like the term Old Testament and New Testament did not exist, obviously, when the Bible was written. We have to recall that the word Bible itself, I know persons have taught us stuff, and I like some of it, but it's not necessarily original. And how you doing, Auntie Marion? Praise God for you, right? Um, Prayerfully Young Solomon has uh, reached out by now. I think he has. Um, but but yeah. So if we talk about this thing as Old Testament, New Testament, and what we call the Bible, I know persons will tell you, "Oh yeah, the Bible, it means basic instructions before leaving Earth," and that's a great like sermon, depending on what that's a great point for a sermon. Probably even Holy Spirit led as far as acronyms, things like that. But the word Bible is based off a word, right? Biblia, biblios, right? Some would even argue, and I agree with it. I don't know if it's an island per se, but it's off of the coast of a Mediterranean slash Grecian town, etc. Latin speaking country, etc., etc. Persons might argue where it is on the map. I agree with the even that being a specific place, but Bible really comes is a word that means a set of books, or it can even mean a book. But the Bible, really, the word Bible, where we get it from today, and how you doing, Minister Raj? Um, the word Baba Kasha, the word Bible means a set of books. Ultimately, that's what it means. The word Bible really means a set of books, right? That's ultimately what it means. The word holy means whole or one set of books. It also means set apart set of books, right? The problem with this is that the Holy Bible is not technically, right? Because especially what we're reading nowadays, is why we're learning and putting stuff back together, making sure that stuff that we were not raised with and things that like explain a lot of things, we have to put it back together properly, because the Bible itself technically is not whole. If you only have 66 books, it's not whole, right? Straight up, and somebody says, no, that's not true. No, it is true, because even obviously some of us know about the Council of Nicaea and things of that nature, and Constantine, and even this stuff happened before Constantine, and you have to go to something called the Alexandrian Bible, which exists now in versions like your NIV and stuff like that. Some of those things exist, but the word Bible, once again, is a set of books, and if it's a whole set of books, right, or a holy set of books, we have a problem, because in the 66 books, it tells you to read a 67th book twice when it tells you to read the book of Jasher, right? So we already see something's not right. Now, persons will argue the chronicles of Noah and the book of Enoch and the book of Jasher and the 12 books of the Apocrypha and the Testament of Yabab and all these different things that are there. They'll start to argue these things are not correct, they're not real, etc., and they shouldn't have been used. The problem is that though the same Roman Catholic Church, or the beginnings of what we now today call the Roman Catholic Church, the same Roman Catholic Church that you're saying had every right to dismiss certain things in the Bible, you don't realize that the same Roman Catholic Church and even Protestant churches, the first Protestant churches, so this means the Bible that was written in 1560, 1590, 1611, all of them have the Apocrypha in them, which means the Apocrypha was not removed. As much as persons, see, this is why you got to know what's going on. We have to be proper historians. The Bible was not, those things were not taken out of the Bible in the 1600s, so in the 17th century. So we still had books that are lost in the 17th century. Some of the lost books are there in the 17th century. So when somebody says, oh yeah, this was never supposed to be in there, but you follow Roman Catholicism, but if you're a Protestant, you believe in books that they had. So you have to realize that it's after the 1700s or 17th century that you start to see persons say, let's remove the book. And you still had many Protestants and many Roman Catholics that still use a lot of the books that you say shouldn't be in there, which means that this is not overall agreement on the 66 books. This is something that just a lot of you who went to certain types of churches and certain belief systems, like, a lot of Baptists, a lot of AME, a lot of Kojic, a lot of, Free Will Baptist, Southern Baptist conferences, apostolic, a lot of stuff like that, they were taken out. And we don't recognize that that's more of a holdover of a slave Bible, right? If you guys don't know about the slave Bible, if you were to go to a Bible museum, most of the time they're going to have somewhere in there for you a slave Bible, right? And you're not gonna recognize and realize that the slave Bible. I'm sorry, who is that? Soul Pain. Okay, welcome on. How you doing? And thank you for being on. You're not gonna recognize and realize that the slave Bible is something that was there, but it also shows a deeper problem, which is whoever's in charge and whatever they're trying to do, especially financially, those persons will take things out of the Bible to make it work, right? Like even though we know Christmas is not biblical, allow me, since it's the season that persons are in and everything, realize that even Christmas, right? The reason why you see Santa Claus, depending on where you are in the world, Santa Claus looks different because he sells and makes money for persons differently, right? The myth, right, of Santa Claus sells differently depending on where you are. Which reminds me, I was supposed to get into the 5 Santa Clauses. I don't know if I'm prepared today again or not. But I might be able to pull something out, a rabbit out of my hat with that too, sir. But we were supposed to talk about that a while ago. I never sent you anything, or I said I would try to find it, and I think I started. I don't know if I ever found the stuff, but I got notes somewhere on it. But maybe something will come to my mind. But anyways, if you go to different places, so if you're in the United States of America, Santa Claus looks round like a Coke can. It has the Coke, right? The Coke bottle and Coke can have changed over time. Santa Claus changes over time, right? Because you're selling something, right? If the bowl full of Jello, that's more English, that's more European, that's more twas the night before Christmas and all through the house. Not a creature was stirring, not even a mouse, right? That's more sleigh ride. That thing, that's more of that mindset, right? So where you come in, just like the mixing of iron and clay, when you have all these belief systems come together, somebody takes the ones that they like and they shape it into whatever they need. That's why some places you know about Krampus and Black Pete and Santa together. In some places you just see the cookies and you see the stockings that could possibly have coal in them, but you don't know. Or some places to where they're into bloodletting. They talk about the bloody parts of Christmas. Some places to where they're into bloodletting, but you don't know that it is, and they've just erased that, but they still want to make money off it. You see the candy cane, right? If you know the candy cane, it looks like the same swirl is on the barbershop, right? And when you look at the barbershop, right, when you go to the barbershop, those of you who stay, it's been a long time for me. But those of you, I was just thinking the other day, my son, we were walking past the barbershop, and I was like, he's never even been in a barbershop. You know what I'm saying? Like, because he never had his hair cut. But for those of you who've been in a barbershop, right? You have the swirl. Well, what was that for? Because the barber not only was there to cut your hair, but also he was supposed to be trained in bloodletting. So if you ever needed, if we're sick and in a culture that thought that bloodletting was going to heal you of certain things, you went inside and they cut you open to try and get you to feel better, right? So you'll see that where different persons go, right, in different things are set up in different places around the world, you will discover very quickly that they put these things, they put these things out in different places. You'll see that very quickly, right? That where you go, it's shaped different. Well, the same thing for us is happens in the Bible, where persons that were in control and in charge, and persons who are using the Bible to weaponize it to make sure that they have more money in their coffers, and while putting you in your coffin simultaneously, they change up what the word is. So, all that being said, we have to recognize the Bible itself, that most of us, if not all of us, if we be honest, at some point, but the Bible that most of us have been introduced to and have read is not actually anywhere close to what the Bible was in its origin. And as we get closer to the origin, we realize that now we have to even learn to how to compartmentalize, how to replace certain words that have been changed over time, how to make sure we comprehend our culture, a lot of different things, right? How you doing, Sister Monica? Right? So in all these different things, we see that there's this big, huge, there's lack of truth, and this lack of truth has become the thing that we put in place rather than the truth itself. Right? The lack of truth has become the thing that we put in place rather than the truth itself. Right? So in all these different things that are going on, right, and all these different things that are happening, we have to actually get back to Amat, or to the truth, right? Amat, spirit and in truth, right? So when we speak on specifics, as far as now the core essence of the question, right? New Testament, Old Testament, somebody had to write that in over time, because here's the deal. Before what we call the Bible was formed into the Bible, now that we have all that in our mindset, before what we call the Bible was formed into the Bible, there was no such thing as reading it all as a set of books. You had to go and get different scrolls. Kind of like, almost, for those of you, some of us, now time flies where nobody even uses these things anymore, but some of us grew up with encyclopedias, right? And so your Bible was more like encyclopedias. And there were persons who kept stuff together. There were persons who believed things, but there were also different things that were in different places that over time were brought together by persons who believed, or somebody who would know about this or whatever, especially when we started to scatter. So when you get to the so-called New Testament, right, Paul is writing letters, Peter is writing letters, somebody's being a historian and putting together different things that we now know of Acts of the Apostles. John is writing letters. John is getting visions and writing Revelation. Right, James writes a letter, puts something out. We see these things there, but then eventually they'll be put together. Right, so a lot of persons might not know this, and but it is believed that there's actually more like 4 letters to the Corinthians. We can't really put our finger on everything. Some of it might have been changed, so we're having a tough time to where in society we can, they can release like, hey, here's 2 more letters for you, but there's probably 1 Corinthians, 2 Corinthians, 3 Corinthians, 4 Corinthians. We just know about 1st and 2nd, though. These are ones that we can't doubt, and we know that Paul himself did these things. He vouched for it. Persons who were with him vouched for it. We can go ahead and put that stuff together, right? You have many different epistles that Paul would have written. Besides just that, you have many different epistles that Timothy would have written. As far as Paul would have said the words, and Timothy would have, he would have wrote out what Paul was saying. So Timothy even, it should be credited some. Timotheus, yes, Timothy actually helped some of the things that Paul wrote. We have different, but these are things that are put together later as a set of books. And even in the set of books, you have to learn that not all of it's in chronological order, right? The book of Acts, technically, is talking about from when Christ dies through, Paul and Peter and all them, their life. But then, and Paul's first letter that you see in your Bible is the book of Romans. But the book of Romans really is like one of the last books he ever wrote, but it's so powerful that they put it first, so that anything else that you read after that from Paul and anybody else, really, you'll comprehend. And it comes right after the book of Acts, because in book of Acts, the apostles and others are having issues with how do we graft persons in, what are we supposed to do, how does circumcision go, all these questions are there. And then you have a lot of discussion in Acts, and then you have Paul, who takes the book of Romans, which is we call the Christology, and he starts telling you how the law is holy, the law is perfect, the law is spiritual, it becomes the law of the flesh when you begin to sin, but the law was always spiritual, the commandments are holy, all these different things. He said there's a benefit to knowing the law. He said you can't deny Israel in her place. He says it's still my prayer that Israel might be saved, while simultaneously saying those who were not born Israel can become part of the country and become part of the kingdom, but they have to deny where they come from as far as denying their flesh and denying anything cultural that comes against the culture of kingdom, and they have to begin to start transforming by the renewal of their mind, right? So all this stuff is happening, right? When the books come together, somebody's putting it together. Whether we want to say, well, but they erased this book or not, sometimes that might be the case, but sometimes there's persons that are actually fighting to like try and keep an essence of the book and might be changing some things. Eventually, you must comprehend, even when the Bible's put together, half of it wasn't Greek. These letters are not necessarily always written in Greek. Some of them have Greek in it for sure, but they're not necessarily written in Greek. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, they're not written in Greek, right? The book of Acts originally is not written in Greek. You don't get to that until you have Romans start to, who are very big on Greek and on Latin, right? They appropriate different cultures of those who they conquer. And so they begin to put it in Greek, and then eventually you start to see a lot of persons, especially out of Roman Catholicism, using Latin, right? You see that up until King Henry VIII in the 1500s, when he decides that he's going to become the first pope of Protestantism, and as a FU to Rome, says, I'm not going to write the Bible in Latin, I'm not going to write it in Greek, I'm not going to write it in French, I'm going to write it in English, which was considered to be the language of the poor. At that time, right, if you were royalty, or if you were somebody who was even in Roman Catholicism, why would you ever write the Bible in English? The only reason it's written in English is because the first pope of Protestantism. So yes, Protestants have popes, have a pope. And the first pope was King Henry VIII, right? So you can see this stuff happening. So I'm saying all this to say, if we go to the so-called Old Testament, obviously there was no, we kept all the records together. We kept stuff in temple. We kept versions of, or copies of it in synagogues and stuff like that. But there was not anything called like Old Testament. It was always Terach, or the instruction, or the doctrine, or the law. It was always such. Right, that's what we looked at it as. And how you doing, Blessed Jewel? How you doing, Bruder Richard? And if family's listening, right? How you doing? I miss a couple persons coming in here. I feel like, oh, Denise Davis, thanks for being part of the community, and thank y'all for sharing, and thank you for the likes, right, and all that great stuff. Feel free to share it with others too. They make it difficult for us to come on here. They always trying to hide it from persons. I'm sorry, Sister Monica. Shalom. How you doing, Brother D? Excuse me. Peace, peace, peace. How you doing, Elder Tamara? And I'm not sure if it ever reached you, Sister Monica, but if not, happy belated born day. I tried to reach out. I think I did. I'll be all over the place sometimes, so you got to forgive me, but I'm pretty sure I reached out, right? Yami Asalav, right? So yeah, so you got to get to a place where you recognize and see a lot of the stuff that's going on, and a lot of things that have happened, right? So now when we talk about testament, right, when we talk about covenant, we must comprehend that there is no old or new covenant. Yahashua, Yeshua, right, Yahushua, Christ, did not come back to make sure that we had a new covenant. He came back to make sure that we went back to covenant. Everything in the Bible is to bring it back to one. What is the most important commandment of all? Deuteronomy 6:4, Yahweh Asah, right? Shema Yachad Sha'al. Shema Yachad Sha'al. Yahweh Alachem, Yahweh Alachem Alav, right? Achaba Elachem. At Alav Lab, right? At Alav Anan. At Alav Rava, right? At Alav Nachivash. Right? In other words, hear, O Israel, Yahweh Elohim is one. We always go back to the one. And you should love him, right? With one love, with the one who made everything, the one who is the one. And you should love him with all of thy heart, and with all of thy soul, and with all thy mind, and with all thy strength. Or, depending on if you're looking at the different versions of it or whatever, right? One, they focus on different words, but you'll see that basically that's quoting Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse 4. Christ quotes that himself, and the person who asked him the question, right? How you doing, Empress? Right? The person who answered the question, that's what you're looking for specifically, okay? Right? So the person that answers the question, right, is Christ. And Christ says that I'm come to what? To be one. That's the goal, right? I've come to be what? To be one. That's what he said. So so his whole thing is to bring it back to one. Christ came to be the correction, right? There's many different things he came, of course. He came to make sure that he could, the correction, hits a whole bunch of things, right? But Christ, when he comes to be the second Adam. He's labeled us as, right, as Adam Bayit. He's second Adam, right? Adam number two, if you will. So what does that mean? That means that he came to bring back what we lost with Adam. Adam sinned. Adam broke the law. When Adam breaks the law, everything on earth is affected. How you doing, Minister Stephen? How you doing, Brother TJ? Right? How you doing, everybody coming on? So Adam breaks the law. How you doing, Realist Empress? Right? Everybody coming in. So when Adam breaks the law, we all fall into sin. So he has to follow every law. I need you to recognize this, right? Because a lot of persons miss this. He's not just bringing Israel back, although one might point out just one little verse and keep it by itself right now. He came to make sure first, he came back for the lost house of Israel. I mean, yes. First, sure, because of covenant, Abrahamic covenant. But Abrahamic covenant was required because Adam sinned. Did you catch that? Uh-oh, don't miss it. And thank you for sharing the line. I appreciate you. Right? Don't miss that. Abrahamic covenant was required not because of Israel's sin. Israel didn't even exist yet. Abrahamic covenant was not required because of Shemitic sin, even though that had happened by then. Abrahamic covenant is not required because of Hebrew sin. Abrahamic covenant is required because Adam sinned. You see, now we're going to talk about testament or covenant. See, he came to require, see, all these different things. See, watch this. The Most High never used these labels. I won't say never. How about this? Most of the labels we use are not used by the Most High. When we learn this term Abrahamic covenant, we think that that means that Abrahamic covenant is somehow separate from the covenant that he had with Adam. Right? But remember, this this is not a separate thing. Abrahamic covenant is not designed to be separate. You with me? You feel me? Right? Don't miss that. Abrahamic covenant is not designed to be a separate covenant from the covenant that he wanted with Adam. He restores. Matter of fact, if you were with us in the Bottle Shot series, the Genesis series that we did, right, to start off the year, then what you get to is you get to a place where you recognize that Abraham is, when he enters into covenant with the Most High, is given the same promises upon his life that Adam was given. You see? And we don't think about it that way. But just because we don't think about it that way doesn't mean it's incorrect. What I'm saying. I want you to catch that. Right? Abrahamic covenant. Hear me, beloved. Don't miss it. Abrahamic covenant is not designed to be something completely different than, I don't know if we say Adamic, but Adam's covenant. Abraham is told, be fruitful, multiply, replenish. When it goes from Abraham to Isaac, Isaac is told the same thing. Be fruitful, multiply, replenish. When it comes to Jacob, Yaakov, before he becomes Yahadashah, Israel, he's told, be fruitful, multiply, replenish. Right? Subdue. These are all Abrahamic covenant. I'm sorry, this is all the same covenant. When David becomes king, he's supposed to be fruitful and multiply, replenish, subdue. When King Solomon is there, he's supposed to keep the same thing. right? This is when Christ comes back, he speaks the same words. The covenant is always supposed to be the same to the same Yahweh, to the same Elacham Shaddai, right? To the same one. It didn't change. We have seen it change so often that we don't even know really what to do with it or where to go with it or where to start. But it was never to change. Not once was it supposed to change. The change has become something that we have had happen or that we have allowed. But it's the same covenant, same Holy Spirit that that Adam talked to in the Garden of Eden is the same Holy Spirit that rose Christ from the dead, according to Romans chapter 8, verse 11. It's not a new covenant. So when somebody says New Testament and New Covenant, Old Testament, Old Covenant, that's something that we wouldn't be familiar with. Once again, this was not in book form, right? Yeah. And even the book form that we're used to, right? Saying Old Testament, New Testament, once again, these terms, these things, in a lot of these books that have been taken out, they don't get taken out until after the 17th century. Because we know that they're still in the Bible, even in Protestantism, they're still in the Bible in the 1600s. And it still exists in Bibles in Protestantism and Roman Catholicism and in Orthodox Christianity to this day. To this day. Right? So we have an issue. No problem. She's living in favor. I have one more question before you after this. I'm answering one question now. We're going to go to the second question that hopefully won't take too long because it's going to kind of be a continuation of this conversation we're having, and then I'll try to recall that. So if I come to it, you're supposed to be number 3. I'm on number 1. There's another one, and then you'll be the next one up. If I forget the question, please hold me accountable. I'll try to make sure that I recall that, okay? And try to go back to you. But welcome on. How you doing? That's right. So this is a renewed covenant. Wagwan, Audrey, how you doing? To everybody on all platforms, thanks for joining us. We are in the midst of a series called Reversing the Curse Means Revisiting the Lie. And we have Q&A session, the second of 2 days. We do every other Thursday and Friday, strictly Q&A, to where you guys get to lead the conversation. And we allow the Vachakodash, Holy Spirit, Holy Ghost, to take over and help us to answer these questions. How you doing, Sister Deborah, by the way? If I didn't say so already. How you doing, Elder Tamber, if I didn't say so already? All righty. So we have to recognize and look at this properly. So Yahweh did not send Yechashvai, right, by Ruach HaKodash to make sure that we have something new. Now, for many of us, because we have not been taught these things become new. Because many of us were separated from the culture of kingdom, these things are like new, right? But if I can just throw one more thing on here, and then I know time-wise, I kind of got to taper off and go to the next question. But if I might also introduce something else for you all, or maybe for some of you as an introduction, let me ask you this. If Yahweh is eternal, right? We're talking about eternity now, not time. If Yahweh is eternal, is there anything for him that is new or old in the first place? See, let's come out of time. See, this is why we miss some of this too, because we still are trying to do things that wind up in time. So we have conversations in time where some of these conversations should be not just in time, but also eternal. Right? If Yah is eternal, and ultimately he wants us to be able to get back to eternity, is there anything in eternity that is new or old? See, we think in terms like this. Matter of fact, our bodies get older, but that's just as far as time. This is why you're going to get a glorified body. Your glorified body is not going to be new or old. It is. Right? Exactly. So the answer is no. There's no such thing as old or new to him. So if he made a covenant, and the word says that whatever he speaks shall live yesterday, today, and forevermore. If it says that he has no beginning and has no end, if he had a covenant that he made with Adam, did he need a new one with Abraham, or was it the same one? If he made a covenant with Adam, did he make a new one with Christ, which ultimately technically is himself? Did he make a new one with himself? Even Christ said he didn't come to give you something new. He said he came to give you the same thing that the prophets before you did. Now, you guys can read this on your own. I'm not going to flip there, but Matthew chapter 5, this is our sweet spot, Sermon on the Mount. I've given y'all a little break from this sweet spot for a few weeks, or for at least a week or two now, right? With our sweet spot, you guys know I like to come back to this sweet spot because it's a reality, right? So our sweet spot, right? If you go to the sweet spot, right, which for us, the working definitions, if you will, are kind of colloquialisms within house, right? But the Sermon on the Mount, Matthew chapter 5 through 7, if you go to Matthew chapter 5, verses 10 through 12, right, you'll see very clearly that Yahshua says, Barak are those, right, who are lied on, right, for his name's sake, who are lied on. So if you do what Yahshua says and speak what he says, and they lie on you, you should rejoice and be exceeding glad. Why? Because they did the same thing to the prophets that came before thee. If I speak what the prophet speaks, and somebody gets on me because I speak what the prophet speaks, if I speak what Terach speaks, if I speak what Yahshua speaks, if I speak what Jacob speaks, if I speak what Isaac speaks, if I speak what Abraham spoke, if I speak what Pelag spoke, if I speak what Avla spoke or Hebrew spoke, if I speak what Shem spoke or Shem spoke, if I speak what Arphaxad spoke, if I speak what Selah spoke, if I speak what Noah spoke, right? Because Noah spoke the same thing that Methuselah spoke. So if I speak the same thing Methuselah spoke, if I speak the same thing that Enoch spoke, if I speak the same thing that Jared spoke, if I speak the same thing that Mahalalel spoke, if I speak the same thing that Enos spoke, if I speak the same thing that Canaan spoke, if I speak the same thing that Seth spoke, and they get on me. If I speak the same thing that anybody who speaks this is of the priesthood, a priesthood that whether you are Levi, a priesthood whether you are Melchizedek or Melchizedek, a priesthood whether you are, because as much as we, and I focus a lot on the negative side, right? But Balaam was actually the reason why he was brought in was because he spoke the truth, and everything that he spoke was correct, and so he was going to go ahead and betray, right? That was what he was on his way to do. But he told him at first, the only reason why what I speak works is because everything I speak is correct. When he decided to speak what was incorrect, that's when he went outside a priesthood, right? But in all these things that are spoke, right? And all these things that are spoken, one must recognize and one must realize that if I speak what they spoke, and I continue in what they spoke, and I represent it correctly, then guess what? If somebody says something about me, that's when I rejoice and be exceeding glad, because they did the same thing to the prophets that were before me. Then Matthew chapter 5, verses 17 through 20 go like this. This is still Christ speaking, by the way. This is after he said you are the light. This is after he says you are the salt. This is after he says he sets us on a hill as a city, right? Then he says, Matthew chapter 5, verse 17, he says, think not that I came to destroy the law or the prophets. So this so-called Old Covenant, Old Testament, think not, don't allow anybody to make you believe that I came to get rid of that. I came not to destroy what the prophets built, but I came to what? To fulfill. Fulfill does not mean to put it into, it means to be put into effect. So we had gotten to a place, right? If you read Malachi correctly, if you're reading, First and Second Esdras, First and Second Maccabees correctly, if you're reading Romans chapter 10 correctly, because you go straight to verse 9, but if you read verse 1, verse 2, verse 3, verse 4, verse 5, right? Christ didn't come to destroy the law. He came to put it into effect because, according to Romans chapter 7, we had started to make our own traditions based on the law rather than following the law, which means we have turned the law into a law of sin rather than what it originally was the law of the Spirit. When we put our flesh on it, when we put our desires on it and what we want to make out of it, we didn't get what we need out of it and what Yah needs for us to have. So our needs would be met because our needs are not supplied according to what we want, but our needs are supplied according to His riches and glory. So when we're going further away from Him, He had to make sure that He came back to put that in place. So Matthew chapter 5 verse 17 says what? That I come not to destroy the law, but I came, or the prophets, I came that it might be fulfilled. Then He says in the very next verse, verse 18, until heaven and earth pass, until we get to Isaiah 65:17, until we get to Revelation chapter 20, chapter 21 and chapter 22, until we get to Matthew chapter 24, until we get to this place where now what is it, second Esdras chapter 9 verse 6 and chapter 6 verse 9, whichever, where um, Israel is, Esau is the end of the world, and Israel is the beginning of everything else. Until we get there, right? Until we get there, until heaven and earth pass away, should not one jot or tittle. Now, in modern English, this is just basically saying, the dot on the I and the dot on the J. Maybe you want to even include, crossing your T's. But the original language would say not one minuscule, not one minuscule measurement, right, of the word, because every character has a number value attached, nor even the way it is written, the yavad, the yad, however you pronounce it. It should not be changed. Straight up. It should not be changed. Right? And then it says after that, Matthew chapter 5, verse 19, those who do not teach the law. So we're trying to get rid of Old Testament and trying to say, New Testament is all that matters. Right? And even persons whom I love walk a really fine line, really weird line with this. I love me some Bishop Jennings, or Apostle Geno Jennings, until he starts trying to talk about some of the law doesn't matter. Okay. I love me. Like, if it wasn't for Dr. Miles Monroe, I don't know where my life would be. Love me some Dr. Miles Monroe. But when he starts talking about Old Covenant, so I know enough now where I got to be like, okay, whoever it is that you love to listen to, I promise you, like, they have nice things about them, but if they start saying things against the word, we got to know enough law. Right? The Bible tells us that those who do not, who teach against the law and do not live it themselves, they are considered to be the least by the kingdom standards. And those who teach the law and live by it, they're considered to be the greatest by the kingdom standards. Right? I'm just coming out your Bible. This is Matthew 5:19. And then Matthew chapter 5, verse 20 comes behind that and says, you, beloved, you who would have shown up to the Sermon on the Mount, right? You who would have followed Christ. You who would have gone hungry to the point to where he would make sure they would feed you because you were more concerned about being fed by him than you were about actually eating physical food. He says you should know the law greater than the scribes and the Pharisees. The problem is that you have a lot of scribes and Pharisees who should be teaching you the law to help enhance what you're doing, but instead you're allowing somebody to teach you the law to do what? To simply keep you down, and you don't know the difference. Matter of fact, some of you, if I be honest with you, if the shoe fits, wear it. If it doesn't, take it off. Some of you just go off of what I say because I say it. Very dangerous. Right? I don't mind challenges. Challenging for the sake of challenging, or challenging just because it's like you in a fight mode or fight or flight mode, and that turns to whatever. That's different. But I don't mind somebody coming at me and being like, hey, what is this? Or I question this, or what about blah blah? What about when you say, or I found a scripture that I feel like is what? We can have that conversation, right? But it's and we should. But many of persons have even gotten to that place. But at least make sure it's based off of law. And if you don't know the law greater than the scribes and the Pharisees, that's when you get whooped. That's when your life gets whooped. That's when persons take everything out of your pocket, but don't ever put anything in it. Right? That's when somebody, that's when you allow the person you're putting stuff in their pocket to go ahead and tell you why you still not, let that person tell you blah blah whatever about yourself. Right? You have to make sure that you get to a place to where you recognize law enough to where anybody, including myself, anybody, including your favorite teacher or preacher, right? We all have bad days. We all have bad moments. I have moments that I can't recall something, or I might just misspeak something. I might shift 2 words around. You need to be able to know the law enough to be like, oh, he meant blah, 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 right? Or she meant blah, 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 right? You need to know that, or else you could be living off something and then later on be like, well, you said 10 years ago, and they might not have meant to say it. And you could have maybe even corrected them in that moment. Or at least known enough to correct it in your mind. That's why the renewal of your mind. You got to know the law for this stuff that works. And then And then, of course, Matthew chapter 7, verse 12. We're done with this. We're going to move on to the next question. Great question to get us started. Matthew chapter 7, verse 12. Right? Where we only live by half of the golden rule, but it's a whole rule. It's a holy rule. We like to live, how you doing, Sister Shima? We like to live by part one of the rule, which is do unto others as you want done unto you. But the whole rule is do unto others as you want done unto you. And what's the standard? For this, to do unto others as you do unto you, is the law and the prophets. It's not omission of the law, right? It's saying, hey, I actually do unto others according to the law. And then if I do according to the law, then I expect that what I give out is given unto me. This would help us too, because then it puts us in a place where a lot of the friends, and even if we be honest, sometimes family too, that we're expecting certain things from and we're giving certain things to, right? We realize that, hey, if I give to somebody that's lawless, something that's lawful, I shouldn't expect a lawful return. Yes, whatever you sow, you shall reap, but you're supposed to sow it in the field that Yah says sow it. That's right, we got to eat the whole scroll. You're not supposed to just sow it anywhere. You sow it in the field that Yahweh said. And the issue that a lot of persons want is they want to take pieces of what we're given and they want to put it wherever they're headed. But it doesn't say trust in Yahweh with all thine heart and lean to your own understanding in all, in any way that you decide to go. Acknowledge him and then he'll show up. It says trust in Yahweh with all thine love, your whole heart, and right, trust in Yahweh with all thine passion, and right, and sorry, now I'm getting messed up. Trust in the Lord, trust in Yahweh with all thine heart, and lean not to your own understanding. Be under his standard, and not try to lean on something else. In all your ways, in any way you go, acknowledge him. See if he's there. See if you can, if he's intimate with that way. See if he is intimate to the point of directing you in that way. And then once you know that, then if you go down the path that he's in or he's down, right, then he shall direct you because he'll be in front of you. He's the one that told you to go that route. That's what that scripture means. But what happens is persons go, well, I know Yahweh for myself, and so I'm going to go here. And you go somewhere that he ain't tell you to go. And then everything gets messed up. And then you say, I don't know what happened. Right? I know what happened. You didn't trust in Yahweh with all your heart. You leaned to your own standard and understanding. You went down a way and then you said, hey, Yah, why aren't you here? And he said, no. Look for me in every way you look. And if you see me there, then go down that path, and then I will direct you because that's the path I wanted. If you don't know me enough to go down that path, then you already got a problem in the first place. But if you know me, you wouldn't go down a path that I wouldn't want you to go down. How you doing, Nola Peach? Thanks for being part of the community. Come on, don't miss it. A lot of us, we want to move and all this stuff or whatever, and we do whatever we feel like doing. And then because we do whatever we feel like doing, and we end up in a situation. Sometimes we're in a situation where, yeah, you got to be in the cave. But sometimes we make decisions just because we feel like doing something. Or we just want to get out of one situation and we get into a worse one. And then we get out of that one and we get into a worse one. Or, hey, I'm going to go back to something that's comfortable. And I go back to what's comfortable. I go back to what I came from, where I left out and I felt like it was bad. Yahweh might not have directed any of those moves. Trust in him with all your passion. Put your passion and your trust in him. And stop leaning to what the standard is that you want. Right? Make sure that in all your ways, every way that you're looking to go in, you have made sure you know Yahweh enough to where if he's not down that path, you won't go. Because if you go down a way that he never directed you to go, he's not directing your path. And we'll throw that on him, or we'll throw that on the devil, or we'll throw that on everybody else. Throw it on yourself. Hallelujah. I'm on, big brother. Right? Okay, all right. Let's keep on going. Next question was basically just kind of follows with that. So next question, why do they basically change the truth every 10 years? Which I don't even know if that was really a big question. How you doing, Nacho? I don't know if that was like a really like huge question you were asking, or you were more so just making a statement. But that's actually a really big thing. Because if you even notice, every decade, things are going to change. This is why you guys are so busy talking about generation. I don't even know how to keep up with them. Is there a Generation Y? I think it's Generation X and Generation Z. And I heard somebody talking about Generation AA now or something. I don't know. I can't keep up. But every 10 years, and this is also like some Willie Lynch doctrine type stuff too. But yeah, every 10 years you're going to see a change. If you get a Bible, written 40 years ago, if you have one, if you can find one, if you go to a thrift store or something, right, and find one or something. But if you find a Bible written, man, time flies. 1985, I guess, right? So if you go find a Bible written in 1985, compared to a Bible written in 2025, right? Every 10 years, just about they're going to change. So you think of the generation as being 40 years, but within that generation, there's been 4 changes. And they both say King James Version. Now, they might be published, different persons for sure, right? But, get a Thompson Chaney Bible, and look at it now. That's why I like to go back to older versions of the Bible, because even though they're in English and even though they are still versions, right, you at least can be like, oh, this is what they are closer to meaning, you know? And they'll trick you. They'll be like, oh, no, we need to. You hear a lot of preachers. I remember when I was first starting to go to church in like the early 2000s, and they were saying, oh, yeah, you have to make sure that we need to make sure we bring some new King James versions because our children can't handle these these, us's, and thous. So we're saying we're going to change the word because you won't make sure that your children's literacy rate is up. Is that what we do? You know what I'm saying? Like even back then, I used to be like, man, there must be something to this King James version. I'm gonna keep it. There must be something to 1611 King James they keep telling me to read. I'm gonna dig into it. There must, you know what I'm saying? Like I had one when I was younger, Jehovah's Witness, but I was just coming out of agnosticism. So when I was first going to church, I was coming back in, but I hadn't really, I hadn't really dug in like I used to and stuff. And I was like, man, I really need to get back to this thing. And my mom, when she had the King James version, like the 1611, there must be something to it. And that Jerusalem Bible and this and that. Right? There must be something to going back to as much original as possible and seeing it for yourself, because we're saying literally, yeah, in the early 2000s when I first started going to church. I don't go to church anymore, but that's when I started going to churches and stuff. And I remember saying that often, like, yeah, we need to make sure these babies, blah blah. And I'm like, now I know these things existed before, but I'm just saying, the reasoning of it, right? And within that person not even studying, what the NIV was. So the NIV not even realizing that the Alexandrian Bible. That's why verses are missing. The verses aren't missing because they found truth and evidence to the claims that these things were originally in the Bible. The verses are missing because those who were part of the Alexandrian congregation of old, right, if you even know what that is, going way, way thousands of years ago, but the persons who had Alexandrian Bibles, they didn't believe that Christ is, that Christ is in fact, they don't believe in the Trinity, and they don't believe, some of them don't even believe that Christ is real. They believe that he's, a thought process. What you guys today now call Christ consciousness. There's a lot of things that we don't even know get changed. For example, what is that called? Stoicism? If you've ever heard of Stoicism, this is a little bit off, but hopefully it'll help you to see contextually what I'm referring to. Stoicism. Who's the most famous person out of Stoicism? If you know about Stoicism, who would be the most famous person who is considered to be, a upkeeper or somebody that person's learned Stoicism through? Give you a hint. Think Rome. Think Roman emperor. If you want another hint, right? If you want another hint, think movies. Think, what is that? With Gladiator, right? If you look at Stoicism, right? Right? Think Stoicism. Yeah, Marcus Aurelius. How you doing on fire? On fire. On fire, forgive me. Am I about to give you the wrong name? Is it Betty? Sister Betty? Am I right? I hope I'm not giving the wrong name to the wrong person. But it is. All right, I thought so. I was like, I know the face. I'm pretty sure that's Betty's face. Okay, welcome on. So yeah, Stoicism. Stoicism by Marcus Aurelius, right? Now, a lot of you guys think about Marcus Aurelius as being stoic and stuff. And he was, I guess, there wasn't really a term for it back then, but, what we call Stoicism. Marcus Aurelius did not make up Stoicism. You gotta know that, right? Like Stoicism had existed for 500, what we call today Stoicism, had existed for 500 years. I'm trying. Thank you. Right? Did you catch that? We don't know stuff, so we just go off of whatever. Stoicism had existed for 500 years before him, right? And because we go off of what he put in his journal, he didn't write a book, right? It's now become a book, but it was his journal. He was journaling. He was recording what he's going through in life and his thoughts and things, and he recorded his thought process. And a lot of persons really liked his thought process, and so they wrote it. They kept it together. They wrote it down. They kept it throughout the annals of history, and now you can go ahead and you can look it up for yourself to see what he wrote. And even in that, if we be honest, the same person that we love so much committed genocide, right? But we're going off of only what he thinks about what he did. His perspective, the Roman perspective, which is the perspective of the beast. So although I'm not saying he doesn't say some things that, like, if we were just take them in a vacuum, like, oh yeah, he's spitting game, right? Like, he really spitting game. He making it a point. He's saying this and that. Yeah, he definitely, he on point with that, right? He was faithful to his wife. He had even gotten to a place to where they thought he was dead. I can't remember if he was captured or if he basically like was injured or something, but didn't get back. They thought he was dead, and then all of a sudden he was able to get back, and he even was going to allow the person that they had put as emperor. He was going to step aside and say, "Okay, you can be emperor." Like, he actually has some qualities that we can learn from. But that's why we have to realize not everything that's right is righteous. Don't always worry about being right. Worry about being righteous. Marcus Aurelius was kind of trash as a human being, but he treated his family. He treated those who he considered to be Rome. He treated them well, right? But that's not our standard. With that being said, if you were to read about him now, like now, I think Gladiator. Gladiator came out in the 90s. Am I not mistaken? I think I'm correct, right? Is that 95 ish? I don't know. Whenever it came out, but Gladiator comes out, and now all of a sudden, you know, Marcus Aurelius is put up as this person who once again is supposed to be like this great person and da da da. And we forget, you know, that even in the movie they admit like he raised his son wrong. Now in reality, his son and Maximus is like a made up character, so that never existed. But his son wasn't necessarily the greatest emperor after him, and it's because he didn't really raise his son correctly. And how you doing, babe? My wife is on the Honorable Minds. Always check her out on TikTok, YouTube, her website, and Pinterest at Bloom and Flourish, not A&D, the letter N, Bloom and Flourish. She is a healer, herbalist, chemist, biologist by degree. Right? Amon, thank you, babe, for being on. So in all these things that are happening, we have to be careful, right? So especially here you go now, a lot of persons who have never read something for years, right? And never read up on this person. All of a sudden they start introducing him and how stoic he was, and stoicism is the way, and blah blah. Stoicism was a vehicle that was used for genocide against anybody who would come against the leaders of Rome. So you have to be you have to be careful. Where stoicism is literally romanticized. It's very romantic, right? So things can be changed easily. This is why we have to make sure that we have jelly right? Right, no matter where I stand with person, jelly persons that can actually tell history and stuff. You know, I respect, you know, regardless of whatever. I know there's many that would not respect this or that or whatever about our brother, but I'll tell you right now, even Brother Terrence, Brother TJ on here, angelic discipline, right? If nothing else, he can give you, he's gonna give you some history, he's gonna show you some things, and he's gonna make you think about some things differently, right? I am considered by my people to be a jelly as well, right? Somebody who's a historian. We got to keep up things. We got to make sure things. If something were to happen to somebody that ill, they tell us that our importance is so important that if something were to happen to us, you hear what I'm saying? If something were to happen to us, they literally say like it's like a library, you know, being burned. This is, and I'm not telling you what I called myself. I'm telling you what my people have bestowed upon me, and I take it serious. I could have just been like, no, and I tried to do the first, no. But somebody said, no, you're angelically up, and this was before I, you know, even going to this to the what you would call tribe, but to the nation, and them saying you're one of us again, right? So it's important that we protect these thoughts, and we should try to become as much of that. I know that's not everybody's calling, but we should try to protect our culture as much as possible. So yeah, every 10 years they're playing. Look, think about even every 10 years, and then we're gonna move to the next question. Sister, I can't recall the question off the top of my head. Moderators, if you can get to that question that our sister had over on this platform, I would greatly appreciate you. I don't see it right now, and thank you for that, big brother. But If you're still on, you were somebody who, I think this might be the first time you've been on with us, or maybe not. I don't see your question, but you had a question for us. And so if you're still on with us, if you can put it in there, I forget what it was off the top of my head. I think it might have had something to do with covenant or something, but I can't recall. We'll try to find it. I apologize. I'm really not trying to skip anybody. Um, but anyways, if you look at the last 10 years, and we'll try to find our sister's question. If not, today's Q&A day, whatever question. Thank you. Thank you for that. Okay. Thank you for that. Thank you, moderators. Whoever put that up. I can't tell who put it up, but I can see it's a moderator. It doesn't show me the whole thing. Oh no. I still don't see the whole thing. It just says question. All I can see is question. Please expand on the second Exodus. Okay, that's what it was. Okay, I would have way off. Some say, and that's all I see. Some say LEA. I'm assuming that's leaving, but I don't know if somebody can maybe type up the next part of it. All I say is please. All I see is please expand on the second Exodus. Some say LEA. That's all I see. LEA dot dot dot. I'm looking though. I'm trying to scroll and find it. At least I know who it is now. There it is. I see it. Okay. Some say leaving Babylon, assuming it's the U.S. Okay, United States. You're confused. Okay. All right. I got it now. All right. So we'll come to that in a second. Thank you, moderators. That helped out a whole lot because I wouldn't have caught that. All righty. Thank you, babe. Thank you, moderators. Thank you, Sister Deborah, as well. All right. And how you doing? Is it September Wilson? All righty. So we're gonna head right to that question. I just want to put this on there. As far as every 10 years, look at the validity in that statement. Every 10 years, something changed. Look at how we were. Look at who we put up just in music. We didn't talk about a whole bunch of different places. Just in music. Look at every 10 years. Who's your number one? Every 10 years, who's your number one? Now, I'm not saying these persons can't still be famous, but I'm talking about at the peak of their powers. They were at those different decades. In the 80s, who's running it? I'm gonna talk about us. I know there's other persons, but I don't really. I'm just gonna be honest. Since it's gonna be somewhat personal, I'm gonna use some personal stuff. Hopefully, you'll be able to gravitate. I know that like for example, I really dig Guns N' Roses, especially Slash. Right, I understand there's other persons. I'm just not. They're not the persons who like were driving me. But I studied Slash. I studied Slash. At least I still do sometimes. I try to imitate him on the piano. I still to this day wish I could play. I can play lead, so I can do some of that stuff. But I can't play guitar chords to save my life. Right? I really wish I could. But that being said, right? Michael Jackson, Prince, right in the '80s. Right, and if you want to even go before, we could look at going back to the Temptations, or we could look at Earth, Wind, and Fire as well, stuff like that. But look at what's happening, and look at stuff, but look, all of a sudden we go from that, Earth, Wind, and Fire, suited up, slick hair and all that, trying to fit into certain things. But Earth, Wind, and Fire, we can go back before that to the Dizzy Gillespie's. We can go back before that to your Louis Armstrongs. I know I'm just mentioning males as well, so let me not forget persons like Mother Thornton, and of course you have Aretha Franklin. Of course you have Patti LaBelle's. Of course you have Whitney Houston's. Shaka Khan's. I'm just talking about for me. So it's going to be a personal thing, right? I'm going to use. All right. I'm aware that there's more. I don't want anybody thinking that I'm misogynistic or that I'm, racist, about reverse racist. I'm just telling you personal experiences, persons that shaped me, right? And I've had to learn to disassociate with some of these things. Not everything, but some of the things that did shape me because they were not necessarily righteous. So Michael Jackson, right, and Prince. Prince, right, of course James Brown too. We got to throw him in there. Right? If he wasn't influential, I don't know who else was, right? But if you could throw Etta in there, I'm gonna be honest. For me personally, I don't put Etta. Outside of 2 or 3 songs, Etta's not really my jam. I recognize her talent. I'm just saying she's not necessarily my jam, but I get it. Right, but look at starting in the '80s, just 4 decades, right? '80s, mid '80s, 85, 95, 2005. Sorry, 85, 95, 2005, 2015, 2025. 2015, I'm be honest, I'm kind of out the music game in there. I kind of don't even know who was who in that era, but I'm gonna try. All right, I'm just be honest with you. I've kind of come back into some of the music now. 2015, I'm kind of not even paying attention to it. If anything, I'm paying attention to so-called urban gospel music more than anything else at that time, if I'll be honest with you, right? But or even so-called Christian rap, that's where I was 2015. But that being said, um, if I'm looking, Michael Jackson and Prince. Michael Jackson, very tight pants. Prince, very tight pants to the point of what? Of showing his behind, literally. Like, even on like MTV and stuff, turning around, you see in his butt, right? Forgive my language, but what they call assless chaps, right? That man's stuff was up all up in your face, right? Every, slick back hair um, or permed hair, right? Very sparkling, very effeminate colors. Michael Jackson, I actually wouldn't say didn't really do the effeminate colors, right? That was more Prince's thing. But even with that, he wasn't always light colors or what we called, effeminate colors, stuff like that. But very effeminate. And that was something, by the way, that's a holdover from the 60s, the 50s, the 40s. If you're going to go into certain things, especially when you're dealing with segregation, then black folk are not accepted unless they have certain things they consider to be white or certain things they consider to make them look like they're weak because there's still that mindset like we've been dealing with in our watch party for Birth of a Nation, where, hey, these black men are coming in, they're coming not for freedom for themselves, they're coming to take away what you have, to take away what God has put in place, and to take your daughters away from you, right? So if you want to be famous at a certain point as a so-called black person, you do that. You said, what about George Clinton? I mean, George Clinton, yeah, he's more, right, him and Bootsy are more 70s, right? Right? I'm correct in that, right? Yeah, they're more 70s, right? But yeah, tear the roof off the sucker, Bootsy, even to the point to where George Collins is brought back on Tupac Shakur's All Eyes on Me. You Can't See Me, right? Very influential, to say the least. That's the tip of the iceberg. And we talk about Bootsy. I'm trying to just stay somewhat surface level on that because we could be here all day. Like Bootsy Collins' brother, Phelps Collins. A lot of persons don't know all that or James Brown and stuff like that you hear go to George Clinton and things like that. All of that, right? Stay on the scene like a sex machine, all that. That's Phelps. That's not even Bootsy. That's Phelps Collins. Right? So, Phelps Collins, you're talking about influence, right? And then if we're going to go back to guitar player before, so yeah, we can go there all day, or you can talk about the band that they use. We could stay there all day. That's my jam too. Like, I could be there all day, but I'm trying to, so Prince and Michael, as far as who we look at though, right, as the persons, those who they put in place. Now look, a decade later, go from 85 to 95, right? You're in the midst of actually seeing one who's already been shot and had his life taken, and the other who's about to have that taken, Biggie and Pac, right? You had NWA come in and go from the perm hair to the Jerry curl, and now the things that we had that used to be on the street that they said made us dangerous, now that becomes a thing that sells records. And you got to realize the records that are being bought are not just by us, but so-called white children are buying them too, right? There have to be more of them to buy them because there's more of them that are a United States corporation, right? So N-words with attitude was stuff that persons who supported Reaganomics were blasting. I want you to see how this works, but we have to change it. We don't even think about it. We change it so fast. But literally, we went from Michael and Prince and being effeminate to now being toxic masculine. I don't like that term. Remember, hyper masculinity, and it's all about the streets. And as long as we can record it and put it in movies and stuff, we'll go ahead and put it in there. Ricky, right? Should Ricky have dodged? Should he have ran in a zigzag? Should he have ran straight? All that stuff. But they changed it. They were able to change it 10 years. Right? Now, we know if you put Michael Jackson and Prince up, we jam still. And I know Michael and Prince were longer than that too. But hear what I'm saying, right? Like if somebody were to play Thriller right now, and we know what Thriller's about, but we'll start dancing, right? We know Billie Jean, that's not holding, but we'll start dancing, right? We can't, if Dove's Crowd were to come on right now, you know what I'm saying? Liberian Girl, to me that might be the greatest Michael Jackson song of all time, very underrated, right? All this stuff, put it out there, right? Cream, Get on Top. Yeah, I'm just saying. Little Red Corvette. Let that stuff start popping right now. But we go from that in 10 years, society was able to take us from that and say, hey, you know what? Let's start looking at black culture. Oh, black culture, this is the thug culture. The same time that you're starting to see, hey, say no to drugs. While the persons who are saying say no to drugs and will lead, who will lead you 10 years from then to three strikes and you're out, are the same persons who are flooding our community with those drugs. Right? It literally made a whole bunch of money off of the breakdown of our societies and our communities. The best actors could only get actors to where they're getting whipped, the glory tier, or where they're getting shot. Morris Chestnut, Ricky, all that. Right? Doughboy, Jared Curl Juice. This is who was putting it up. This is when the bourgeoisie changes from what we consider the bourgeoisie to be originally, the original bourgeoisie, right, in Louisiana and South Carolina. Now all of a sudden we're looking at them different. And we're putting up a different model for you guys to follow. You following the streets. 10 years behind that, right, we go from 95 to where all of a sudden they're putting all this stuff in Pac and Biggie and Death and everything in East Coast versus West Coast. Now all of a sudden we going from that to Eminem is the greatest rapper of all time. I remember that happened in real time. And Eminem, same Eminem, who was putting out music about black women, talking about that they're all ugly, they stink, they're stupid, because he got dumped by one black woman. He was allowed to go ahead and put that, and we swept it under the rug and protected it. We started to protect. That way made way for the Mac Millers and persons like that to come later on. That made way for the persons who would continue to do what Elvis and a whole bunch of them did, which is make money off yourself, and then later on saying, oh no, I never liked it, I was in the country. Matter of fact, around the time, that's when John Cena, You Can't See Me, who was stealing Tony Yayo stuff, who was making horrible, was doing horrible battle rap and stuff like that, wearing jorts, right? Coming out with the knuckles on and doing this thing, right, to everybody as he was coming out. The doctor of thugonomics. Oh yeah, I'm not always the sharpest tack in the drawer, but I'll still stick you. I remember, right? I recall this stuff. Go from 2005 to all of a sudden 2015. What happened in there? All of a sudden Drake takes over, and I'm not gonna act like he had no bangers, but he never was who he was, and literally changed his whole operation. He went from being, oh, he's the soft one and he understands women and blah. Go listen back to Drake's songs. By the way, that's one of the biggest myths that ever existed, and men perpetuated that myth around women to make sure that women were buying albums, especially black women, because black women had to be the ones to set him up, right? As usually is the case. And then all of a sudden now he don't want nothing to do with them, right? Outside of sleeping with them or talking trash about them, But if you remember, right, Drake, he was just coming out 05. His father was from Memphis. He actually grew up in Canada and found more in common with Jewish persons from Toronto. Was on recording, on wax, talking about how stupid it is to speak in AAVE or but then would speak in a black accent. If you don't know what I'm talking about, basically he would say Ebonics was dumb, but then would go ahead and make sure that he tried to pretend that he spoke the same way that they did in Memphis because his father spoke like that, and he went there from time to time. And somehow, some way, he became more real than Meek Mill. Now, I'm not acting like Meek Mill got to be the realest or whatever, but Meek Mill actually from Philly. Like a street dude, actually from Philly. Actually was in the street selling things. I'm not uplifting. I'm telling you how fast. See, that's just 10 years, how fast somebody can take a little bit of something and be able to shift it. And so nobody challenged that somehow this dude from Toronto who lied and said that his father was never in his life, even though his father has come out and debunked that. And then when Drake was finally asked about it when his father debunked it because he got tired of hearing how he was never in his son's life, Drake was like, oh, well, we got to do that for the cameras. And somehow still got away with it, right? Ran into Pusha T, somehow still got away with it. Then finally ran into Kendrick, who ain't necessarily no saint either, right? But at least we'll say there's some more realism to him, even if his mind is not necessarily righteous. That's right, Drake puts on that black sin culture and all that, right? But this is every 10 years. Now you get to 2025. We shouldn't be shocked. And by the way, this is how you get DJ academics who literally took the war in, the Chirac, the war in Chicago, Chirac, and took that and literally came out on YouTube, made a name and profited off of making fun of black men killing each other, black boys killing each other, taking eulogies and putting them out online, talking about their stuff or whatever. That's why he has to live in the community that he does, and he has to make sure that he has a whole bunch of persons to guard him, because persons are trying to take that man's life. And I'm sorry, how you doing, Lando? So I'm just saying, every 10 years, there's a lot of validity in that. We just kind of talked about 5 different instances at the end of 40 years. So basically, we talked about kind of 5 decades. But look at all that. Literally, where you can see the progress of that, right? But once again, what's the common denominator and all that? They are at ease with our scorn, right? Psalm 123 verse 4. Okay, or Psalm 123 verses 3 and 4. All right, let's go ahead to the next question. Next question. And once again, welcome for joining. Thank you for joining us. We're talking about reversing the curse means revisiting the lie. Today is Q&A. It's the second of Q&A days. Every other Thursday and Friday we do Q&A for a little while. We go over our normal time. We usually end around 11 a.m. New York time, and then do our shout out. Today will probably be around 11:15, 11:20, and do our shout out after that. And Tada, thank you everybody for any donations, anything that you give to help us in building the kingdom. And thank you for any questions. Just thank you for viewing. We appreciate you. Thank you for finding us. We're in a season right now where there's a lot of suppression, and we're thankful and grateful that you guys are helping us. Thank you for sharing the live, sharing it later on, coming and dealing with different things that we're doing. And don't forget, sisters, tonight, before the live session at 7 p.m. New York time, you have the women's meeting. It is Friday evening, 7 p.m. New York time, women's meeting. All right. So, and how you doing, Sister Monique? So, all the stuff we're talking about today, and focusing in on, it's important that we be honest about this stuff. So now, the next question that was up. Thank you for your patience. We are discussing. So the question is basically like the second Exodus, if you will, right? And are we supposed to leave the country, the United States of America? Are we supposed to leave on ships? Things of that nature. Should we stay? Should we focus on being in, the United States of America? All those great things. I'm doing well. Thank you for asking. All right. So, and all these different things. Should we be ready to leave? Should we be getting ready for a second Exodus? And this is a theory. I'll say it's a theory. I know some person don't like this, but it's based really off of a lot of different things, but usually you'll get Deuteronomy 28, the end of it, like Deuteronomy 28 verse 68, verses 67 and 68 will be kind of what persons use for this. Matter of fact, let's go over to Deuteronomy 28 real quick, right? And go through this. This is not the only place, but basically, the mindset, the thought process is, in all respect, even persons who I really respect, like Pastor Darby, Pastor Stephen Darby. He subscribes to this and stuff. I haven't found the evidence of it in the Bible. With that being said, I get the reference of it, right? Where a lot of persons go. So we're going to go to Deuteronomy 28. There we go. I don't know why it's taking so long. Okay, Deuteronomy 28 at verse 68. Okay, so this is one of the places that we get this from, right? And I won't even say we, but persons in the diaspora, right, who bring up this argument, who live by this theory. It's kind of a deeper thing, even. We'll try to see how much we can really go into it. But Deuteronomy 28, verse 68, it says as follows. It says, "And Jehovah shall bring thee into Kemet, again with ships, by the way whereof I speak unto thee. Thou shalt see it no more again, and there ye shall be sold unto your enemies, for bondmen and bondwomen. No man shall buy you." So that's ultimately, and by the way, this is a true statement as far as, this is one of the things that's used to show us who we are. If you go through Deuteronomy 28, it obviously speaks to a lot of different things that is happening, to us still, and things that have happened to us not only just recently in the last 400 to 500 years, but if you know about who the Negro actually is, all these different things, for sure. Deuteronomy 28 is talking about us. Deuteronomy 28 talks about men being jealous of each other and then taking that out on our women. And then there are women not feeling comfortable. Now men and women taking that on their children, and then their children not being raised correctly. So now they start acting up, including men going out on street corners and acting like bulls towards persons. Right? There's a lot of truth in that. Matter of fact, not a lot. It is the truth. We see that constantly and consistently. Thanks for being part of the community with a passion. Right? So we see a lot of this stuff that's heavy. The issue is there really isn't anything that says we're going to go back or we're going to leave. And part of this now gets into some other theories. So like I said, it's kind of deep. See, because there's some persons who will argue, well, the United States of America is where Kemet actually was. And in the United States of America, that's, Kemet was here. And since Kemet was here, or Mizraim, or so-called Egypt was here, then Israel was actually here. And that's why all the persons that are black in the United States of America, they're all Israelites. No, that's not accurate. It's not accurate at all. It's a theory, but it's not even based. And this is when I have to say something that maybe, excuse me, some of you will not like me saying, because you think that I'm saying something so-called reverse racist. Right? Well, we'll get to that, Sister Monique, I promise. But a lot of persons might not like me saying this, but I have to always remind us that a lot of the information we get about us is usually through the prism of somebody who's not us. Right? Which means that we have to be honest. That a lot of our information we get is usually what somebody else was using to tell us that we were nothing. And they were giving us what we here at SOC like to say, they were giving us half truths or partial truths. And a half truth is always a whole lie. If you're giving somebody part of the truth because that's just all you know, yes, different context. But if you're giving somebody a partial truth and then changing up the rest of it, or you'll say, sure, all life started in Africa, but then we'll use Darwinism and what Galton teaches as far as eugenics and different things built upon that to go ahead and say, that these persons deserve, or you'll make up something called in the same time frame Hamitic doctrine to say that Ham was cursed rather than Canaan. So therefore you can say Africa deserves to be enslaved, right? Because they're tied, so that you're enslaving Shem. You started off enslaving the Negro. If you know who the Negro is, we're going to get into that. We'll say that again. But if you know who the Negro is and you know why they were called the Negro, they weren't called the Negro because they were dark skinned. And Negro or Negro is something that came from those who would teach Spain. That wasn't a Spanish word. That's not a Spanish word. If you didn't know. But like we're saying in the series, reversing the curse means revisiting the lies. So we've been taught a lot of lies. So a lot of us here, Negro, and we think, oh, Negro means black. But if you go to Spain, they wouldn't call you Negro. Negro is a specific people. They would call you Moreno. Right? Y'all remember? For those hip-hop hits, Boricua, Morena, but they also have Morena. They match. They had certain times, if you listen to certain versions of it, where you have Morena in there too. Right? And I know we used to get it wrong, right? Because there were Spanish persons that heard it who weren't necessarily, Puerto Ricano, and they were putting some other stuff on it too. But yeah, but if you go certain places, Moreno or Morena, right? Matter of fact, those of you who like Snarky Puppy, if you into that type of music, go listen to the, Susanna sing with them and talk about, the Morena girl in one of her songs. So Morena is more so what they would have called you. If somebody calls you Negro, they're usually racist. Right? Now, nowadays it has changed where some of us call each other Negro or Negra, Negro, Negrito, Negrita, sometimes lovingly or jokingly, right? But for real, if you would have heard somebody call you a Negro back in the day, they were talking about a as a nation. So Negro is a word that goes way back to West Africa, right? Way, way back before Spain became a place that you think of Spanish persons living there. A lot of you don't realize. See, okay, I don't want to use this to take up the rest of the time, but this is a kind of very in-depth question. Thank you for the question, and how you doing, Joe? Thank you for the question. Right, I'm really appreciative of it. It's going to take us to a whole another place. But just this might be the. I'm gonna try. It's Q&A. I'm gonna try to get in as many. You might want to kind of slip some questions in here, and I might answer them here or there. But I'll be honest, this is in depth, right? There's one of those that when you ask this question, I can't just leave it on the surface. Even the surface level is deep. You know, this is one of those where like the surface ain't just the skin of the water, right? And it just ain't the first foot or the second foot. We talking about at least we got to go to 12 feet. You know, even though there's still a whole nother ocean. There's a whole ocean underneath that, but you know, like we're gonna have to spend some time on that. I'm trying to find a way to just skip through it, but I would really be disobedient to what this platform is supposed to be if I did that. So, just put on your seatbelts, put on your thinking caps, put on your scuba gear. We're about to dine, and that means when it's time for us to come up, you know, for air, it's going, you know, just be ready. It's going to take a little bit to decompress, but we're gonna have to go deep. That also means trigger warning. Okay, trigger warning. I'm gonna speak some real stuff. I'm sorry if it really messes with you, but it's necessary. Okay, so we about to speak some real show enough stuff, and some of you know maybe even up to 80% of what I'm about to say. Well, I can already see Holy Spirit the way she's formulating this. We're about to go in a different direction than even I normally would go in. Okay, I'm gonna do my best to make sure that I don't do anything that's gonna get us taken down. So forgive me if I pause here or there, because you know they be trying to take us down for any and everything. But let's do this. So if we're talking about Babylon, all this stuff, so we gotta put this together. I know ultimately the goal is to talk about should we leave, what does it mean to get to come out of Babylon. What's the context of Babylon, especially in the world today, based off of things like Deuteronomy 28, or even when people sneak all that other weird stuff in, like 7 to 1 and all this different stuff that's out there, okay? So I get that's where we're going to land, right? Right. Well, some of that is a little true, right? With some of that, even you have to be careful with some of that, because a lot of us who have not even studied some of what they say, you'd be surprised how many of them agree with us, right? You'd be surprised. That being said, that being said, if we're talking about, let's start. Yeah, I'm on. So let's start with the Negro. The Negro, if you look in not just our story, which we're trying to make sure is the story, right? Yahweh's story and the story of Hadasha'am, but also if you look in his story, which is different, right? Different thing. And thank y'all for the love. If you look in history, if you will, his story, they'll confirm this much, which is that into the 1300s, or in the 1300s is when you start seeing the chattel slave trade begin. But the chattel slave trade did not begin in Africa. I'm going to say that again, right? Most of you know about 80% of what I'm about to say, but just hang in there with me if you do, or just be ready to kind of go through this stuff and, you know, feel free to hold me accountable if I'm saying something different than what you've read or what you know, right? That being said, if you're looking at his story, it still backs up the story, which is chattel slavery didn't start in the 15 or 1600s. Matter of fact, usually they try to say the 1700s nowadays, but it didn't just start in the 1600s, right? 1619 is not the beginning of chattel slavery. Chattel slavery began in the 1300s. There's some places, even with the Dutch, we could say maybe even in the 1200s. Because there's an old saying, especially if you are have any African, history, especially West African, especially Ghanaian, Sierra Leone, Nigeria, places in that area, Timbuktu, even, to where ancient Mali actually used to be in that area as well. Or ancient Ghana, right? Mali used to be, the real. So if you are Ghanaian now, right? What we call Ghana is named after the original Ghana that was further north, right? So that's what I mean by that. Not disrespecting anybody. I am, by DNA, I'm Ghanaian, right? So I'm not disrespecting, right? That being said, and even Tartaria, some of that is a little overblown. But I get, I'm not even going to challenge any of that today because the spirit of what you're talking about is ultimately we talking about the same thing, right? So, but if we're talking about the Negro was West African, and if you're talking about chattel slavery, like enslaving somebody specifically because of the color of their skin, you must recognize that it wasn't at first enslaved. Chattel slavery did not begin specifically because of the color of our skin, but we were actually enslaved because of our status and because of jealousy concerning our status. I'm going to say that again. All right, I want you to recognize something because if you watch these movies and you hear a person try to tell, they'll try to make you pretend that nobody has seen a black person, and there was a point to where black persons were somewhat foreign when you started having persons commit genocide and killing off whole groups of persons, whole peoples, whole nations. That's how England exists. It was the Gauls who killed off the original persons of what you call England, and did the Gauls basically get killed off by the French or those of Normandy who were French and Scandinavian, right? By William the Conqueror, who really is known as actually William the Bastard. And even though the Gauls were already Christianized, by the way, so they weren't even into Gallic paganism, even though Christianity has paganism too, but they weren't necessarily even into the paganism as bad as y'all think at that point. They were more what you call Christian today, even though they were still doing a lot of wild stuff. But then William the Bastard comes in. What's that, the 1100s? 1100s, I believe, William the Bastard, who came in, who wasn't supported by his father, but he used some kind of weird thing to go ahead and say, okay, I'm actually supposed to be over here, and then he came over with Normans, or which is a French word for basically saying like, the Normans are the tall men, I believe is what it's saying, the Nochman. I'm not sure if I'm saying that correctly, but they came over and they offed them, and then after the Normans, right, that's why the Normans come over, and then the Normans die off, and that dynasty dies off, and then it becomes the Plantagenet, and then the Plantagenet die off, and becomes the Tudors, or the Tudor. I'm not sure if that's how you say it, right? But basically, a lot of persons don't know, like what we consider to be European or Eurocentric stuff or whatever, was very much so yours, to the point to where, here's something that many of you may not know. What is the last year? So I'm going to jump around a lot on the timeline. Like I said, it's going to be a lot. I'm going to throw out a lot. Try to hang, and I'm not trying to say this because I'm better or whatever. Hopefully I teach it properly. So this is what I mean. Hopefully I teach it properly because I got a lot of stuff going on in my head. Right? Have your way. Right? Okay. So what is the last year that the last great Moorish king of Europe was over anything in Europe? What is the last year that the last great Moorish king loses? Is anybody aware what that year is? It's pretty close to another, significant thing in his story that actually is lied about as well. No, not 1913, right? In Europe, the last great Moorish king, and I mean Moorish king as far as specifically identified as a Moor, had Moorish land, so-called black land, right up in that place. 1600, closer, but not far enough. Think, okay, somebody got it. I was about to say, think Christopher Columbus. So Christopher Columbus sails the ocean blue, 1492, all that, right? But 1491 is when the last great Moorish king was taken out. 1490, okay, Culture Prospect had it. I'm sorry, I missed you, right? And somebody did say 1400. So yeah, so the last great Moorish king is defeated in 1491. What was the reason that Queen Isabel and Ferdinand came together and fought, right? Because basically the king had a third of Spain, the queen had a third of Spain that was bigger than everybody else's piece of the pie, and then the Moors were hanging on to that last third piece of Spain, right? Why was that? Why was that important? That war was going on. I'm gonna try to find his name for you real quick as it escapes me at the moment. Moorish king who lost in 1491 to Spain. I mean, technically, by the way, he lost it in 1492, but the last siege right? The siege that they lost was in 1491. So technically, you could say they lost in 1492. So whoever said 1492, that's not a wrong answer. You can go either or. Are you talking about when they lost the siege, or they lost the battle and therefore really lost the war already? And in 1492, it was like they conceded they had to go, or they became enslaved. Some of them. So 1491, 1492, right? But it was his name was Muhammad the 12th. You want to look it up, right? Just to make sure, because persons be saying we've been making stuff up. Muhammad the 12th. That's what you're looking for, right? Also known as I think it's known as Abu Abdallah. I don't know if I'm saying that correctly. I believe it was also known as Abu Abdallah, right? They also say here he had a nickname. Oh yeah, Boabdil, right? He surrendered the last Muslim stronghold in Spain to the Catholic monarchs Ferdinand and Isabella, marking the end of the Reconquista, right? Or Quista, I'm not sure. I think you said Quista, right? Reconquista, and centuries of Muslim rule in the Iberian Peninsula. In other words, the reason they fought that war was because Isabel, the reason why she fought it, Isabella, the reason why she fought it was because believed that she believed in what had happened through the Crusades, right? Her great uncles and her grandparents, right? Her grandfather had fought in the war. And so the same way that the daughters of the United Daughters of the Confederacy, UDC, the same way that they did the whole lost cause rhetoric, she does the same thing with the lost cause, where, hey man, we might have lost the Crusades, but really we as Christians are really the chosen people, right? See, this whole Balaam doctrine, this whole, there are those who say they are you and are not, is not only simply talking about Ashkenazi. There are many who try to say that they are us and are not. There are many who say that they're chosen and are not, right? That's deeper than what we think it is. We usually, just because we like low-hanging fruit, we just try to say Esau as if Esau means white. By the way, it doesn't. But we try to say Esau, because don't forget. Can I just put that out there? Somebody who's surprised that somebody like myself might say that. Do some research. If you look at Ezekiel 34 and Ezekiel 35, you see where Israel lives and you see where Esau lives. Matter of fact, do your research. If you know who Esau, when Esau left and married into somebody when he went down south, look at who he married into and where they stayed before that. Right? And if you're the same person who believes that you can't say that the Israelite is white, I'm just trying to teach you something. If you're the same person that says the Israelite can't be white, right? Because how can you be white and get all this cancer that you're getting when you're coming back to your land? Or when the Egyptian prime minister says we won't accept you because when you left you were black, now that you come back you're white. Well then, if you look at Ezekiel 34 and 35, Israel lived on one mountain, Esau lived on the other. I'm just trying to help you out. Right? Just trying to help you out in how you doing the Nulu, or is it Nuulu? I'm not sure how to say it. The new Yulu? I'm not sure how to say it. Please forgive me. Thanks for being part of the community, right? So I'm just putting that out there. We got to be careful. Not saying that persons can't marry into other persons, but you hear what I'm saying? Like, if your whole mindset is, oh yeah, Esau is just automatically white, you're not being honest about the Bible. Right? Doesn't mean that there cannot be some persons of Edom who married him, but look at Edom, look at Esau, look at Edomites in the Bible, right? Look at where they live. If we're going to say you can't be somebody that's in the sun if you don't have certain skin color, then we can't do this. We can't all of a sudden act like Esau now is somehow white in the middle of the desert. Right? Somehow they're white in the middle of Kemet. And some of y'all really aren't going to like this, but if some of Esau had went down with some of Ishmael, right, and married into each other, and then they lived down there, Hagar being Kemetic herself, and then all of a sudden you have Kemetic dynasties and things like that, and then Israel will come in and be married in over years and years, and then many Kemetic persons, right, as well as Cushitic and other persons will leave with Israel when we leave out of Kemet initially. Then you have to realize that also means that some persons who have the blood of Esau over years would make the decision to become Israel, right? Right? Person don't like that. So we don't like, see, that means that they no longer are Esau, though, because they've given up their nation. They're not the nation of Esau. It's nationality. This is what I'm talking about with the Negro. If you know who the Negro is as a nation, you can't doubt who Israel is. You see? Right? I see, once again, we let the West inform us. Once again, please try to stay with me. I know I'm all over the place, but I promise it's going to make sense if it's not making sense already. We let the West tell us who we are. The same West that told you you were nothing. So why would we trust them? Right? This is why your Bible says, who shall believe our report? Not only does Paul say it, but Paul is quoting Isaiah. So either way, if you so-called New Testament or Old Testament, your theology, it still leads to the same thing. Who shall believe our report? We got to report about what our experiences are. How you doing, Sister Greta? To be honest, I think this was from a thrift store from years and years and years ago. The pants that go with it got a big old hole in them. I think the last time I wore the whole set was when we did Feast of Tabernacles 2 years ago. I think that's the last time I broke out the whole set. Well, thank you for being on, right? How you doing? Is it Yah's Ancient Path? And thank y'all for the repost. How you doing, Freddie? Everybody who's on, thank you for the love. Appreciate you coming in from all the different platforms. Thank you so much for being with us, right? So we had to be careful. We're allowing persons who have told us that we're nothing to try and tell us who we are now. No, we're not listening to that. I need you to recognize this. So if Israel is a nation, Israel does not mean black. I'm not here to tell you, therefore, all Ashkenazi and Khazarians are. No. I'm here to tell you that Israel, yes, we have locks, we have, but you must recognize anybody who is grafted in, or anybody who is a stranger with Israel at first, if they become an Israelite, if they follow the law, if they follow the word, if they're grafted in, if they become married in, if they do what the commandments say, then they become part of the nation. I know what they say in English. I know they keep telling you that Ruth is a Moabitess. But Ruth, once she got married in, is no longer a Moabitess. This is why you had this conversation in your Bible, right? Ruth and Orpah's husbands are dead. Naomi has lost her husband, has no sons. She says, I, as an Israelite woman, am going back to Israel. I'm going to sell my land and I'm going to see what happens. I'm done. I'm out, though, right? Who knows if intrusive thoughts are intended or whatever, but she's kind of done, right, with life at this second. And she's like, I'm going to go back to my people. You go back to yours. Ruth and Orpah don't want to go. Now, they're married in already, so they've been living as Israelites because their husbands are Israel. That's how it works. Nationality, right? However, she says, no, go back. You can go back to your people. Orpah doesn't really want to go, but she eventually breaks. She leaves. She goes. Ruth says, no, right? I'm not going anywhere. Your people means nation, by the way. So your nation is my nation, and therefore your Elohim is my Elohim. And they go back together. When Ruth then marries into Boaz, she goes back already considered to be an Israelite, although you would see in the Bible they keep calling her a Moabitess. That's not how that works. That's in English. And to be honest, to be fair, they're probably doing that to make sure that you recognize over and over again, oh yeah, okay, yeah, she was a Moabitess, she could have went back, she was not originally an Israelite. But when she has a conversation with Boaz, Boaz talks to her as an Israelite and says that because she's an Israelite, as an Israelite daughter of an Israelite woman named Ruth, being part of his family, there's something that has to be, there's an obligation that has to be kept. He has somebody who has a right to restore Ruth and her lands. If the person decides to restore them, then he would be able to restore Ruth, and then, well, the first person who would be able to talk to, to restore, Naomi. And so if he restores Naomi, the first person that can talk to Ruth is the one who restores Naomi, right? I think it's his big cousin. I'm not sure. Could it be his brother? Could be his cousin. I think it's his cousin. You can double check it. Read the book of Ruth, but his elder decides he doesn't want to restore the lands of Naomi and feels like it'll be too much. Once he decides not to, he's next up. He restores Naomi as an Israelite woman, and therefore, when he restores Naomi as an Israelite woman, the Israelite who is with her, named Ruth, can now be looked at as somebody who is worthy of being married. That's Israelite law. That's Israelite standards. That's Israelite custom. That's Israelite tradition. That's nationality showing up. But because we don't know how nationality works, we're still thinking of this thing different. And we're still thinking of she's got to be something else. No. When she comes back, Boaz even says, hey, I heard about what you did. I heard that you could have gone back. I heard that you could have left Ruth, but since you didn't, those are the things that are attractive qualities for me. Right? Am I outside the book? Is that in your book? Those things are there, right? Boaz, or who we call Boaz now, right? That he says those things. Why did he say those things? He says those things because that's how it would operate. That's how we operate within our customs. So the knocking ceremony and all that stuff can't take place until first things first, right? Ruth's land, because she's a daughter of Israel. I can't be sitting up there trying to talk about Ruth's daughter, right? Because that's in essence who she is now, Ruth's daughter. But I haven't made sure that I'm sorry, Naomi's daughter. But I can't make sure I holler at Naomi's daughter and I don't take care of Naomi. That's culture. You got to make sure the family's okay. That's culture, right? He's a rich man. How do it look to go ahead and snatch this girl away, but you don't make sure that you help her family? Right? That's a dowry. Okay. So I'm saying all that to help you see that we're not looking at this as far as nationality. Matter of fact, one of the reasons why many of you still look at this thing differently is because you're once again influenced by Eurocentric thought process and IQ and stuff like that. What they say is intellectual quotient. So we don't comprehend that you actually think about a birth certificate rather than nationality. Did you catch that? Many of you are looking at a birth certificate rather than nationality. What does that mean? That means that until the 1940s, nobody really cared. Even when they started having them, some of them were coming out. Until the 1940s, nobody ever thought that you had to have a birth certificate in order to exist. Come on, somebody. Hear me. Right? This is going to break it open. So you got to comprehend nationality. Before we start talking about Israel and who Babylon is and who modern Israel is and all this stuff, like, etc., we got to have an honest discussion. If you don't know how nationality works, you don't know the thought process of this. So many of us are coming through a prism that we've been taught to go through, right? I'll say it again. Many of us are coming through a prism that we have been taught to go through, to where we believe that if a piece of paper validates you, right, or a piece of paper should validate you. That's not what I mean. A birth certificate validates you. In other words, if your birth certificate, or if you're born, this is the mindset that now we have. If I'm born in what's called the United States of America, it means I am American, even if my parents are from somewhere else. But the reality is, on your birth certificate, even for those of you who've redone your birth certificate or have ever, gone through paperwork, or not even redone your birth certificate, sorry, if you've redone your passport or gotten a passport, in your DS-11 form that you have to fill out, it says there specifically, are your parents American? All you have to do is say they're not, citizens of the United States. If you say that, then you're not considered to be a citizen of the United States. They'll put it on your passport. Now, nowadays, they put it in code, but they'll put it on your passport because it's never mattered where you come from. I'm about to help you. I'm about to help you out, right? It's never mattered where you come from as much as that, and I'll put as much because some persons won't like it if I say 0%, and it's obviously not. But it's never mattered as much as where you come from, as much as who you come from. Are you following me? We're gonna go back to 1490s in a second, but we're gonna shape this thing up properly. We got some time left, and we're gonna make sure we hit the dismount and get our 10s. The goal is a 10, not a 2, right? We're gonna do this properly, right? The goal, you must recognize that your mindset should not be where do I come from as much as who do I come from, because where you come from doesn't mean that's who you are. Doesn't mean that's who your people are. Another example, 23andMe, right? If you 23andMe, right? Anybody ever done 23andMe or heard of 23andMe? Probably heard of it for sure, right? If you do 23andMe, even if everything, which is not always the case. Matter of fact, if you know that they're being sued and they're, I don't even know if they exist in the same manner they used to, but I know that they're getting pants sued off because they were sitting up there saying that lizards, and humans were of the same people. People were literally sending lizard DNA in to see if it matched up, and it was saying yes. So even with that, it's messed up, right? It's jacked up. That being said, 23andMe or anything like it, even the persons who are, even the persons who are scientists who deal in DNA will tell you this, that you cannot say where a person is from just because of DNA. It helps. And by the way, we're still learning more about DNA, which means we don't even know 100% if we're using it 100% properly. That being said, right, right, yeah, you saw that. Not only is it lizards too, that there's twins that have done 23andMe who are, they know for a fact, come from the same egg. It has happened many a time to where one twin will be this and one twin will be that. That's if you come from the same egg, right? There could be a little bit here or there where maybe somebody was doing some wild stuff and two sperm from two different guys somehow got in the egg. That's crazy, but it is possible. But that's extremely out there, right? So, or two sperms from the same father can get there at the same time. Maybe that's not a normal thing, right? It's usually 97% of the time, there's going to be only one sperm sitting in that egg, right? Even if you're talking about twins. So if it's twins coming from one sperm hitting that egg, right? Then basically they should be the same father and same mother. So how they have two separate things on a regular basis from twins is crazy work, right? So what persons don't realize and recognize is even if the DNA though was 100% accurate, you can't still say that's a way of determining where persons are just by itself. Because let's say, for example, I'm not great at math. I'm gonna keep the number low for me. Let's say there's 10 um, 10 matching DNAs to what you are, right? So they're trying to figure out where you are. Let's say 5 of them are in Morocco, 2 of them are in Mongolia, and 3 of them are in England. Okay, so does that mean that you're 50% Moroccan, 2% Mongolian, and 3% English? Right, just roll me for a second. I promise you. I know it might be getting boring. It might be. I'm not the greatest at DNA, so I'm gonna keep it basic. But I'm gonna ask a question again. If I have 10 persons that show up on the list, and 5 of the specimens are supposed to be from Morocco, and 2 of the specimens are supposed to be from Mongolia, and 3 of the specimens are supposed to be from England, does that mean that I'm 50% Moroccan and 20% um, Mongolian and 30% English? Is that the case? The answer, they would say on paper, and it's not exactly all the way there is to it. I'll admit that. Let's leave a little bit of space, but let's be honest. That's what the thought process pretty much is. Problem is though, is if I have, let's say, 50% Moroccan, 20% Mongolian, and 30% English, you might be all the way from somewhere in England where persons might have traveled to Morocco or persons might have traveled to, and I know I'm reversing it. I'm being nice, right? But you could have persons that traveled to Mongolia, persons that were enslaved maybe and got taken down to Morocco. You never know. So now all of a sudden you're saying these persons are from there, but just because you have some DNA evidence that there's persons with similar DNA doesn't mean that that's where they're from. Matter of fact, it could mean that they're not from any of those places. It could just mean that some of the persons who share your DNA ended up there, but they don't have DNA of where the original persons are from. You see? So you can't just say somebody is something just because. Now, when we get to a point where somebody maybe is 98% Nigerian, maybe we can start having a conversation about, okay, you probably got some Igbo or some Yoruba or something in you, right? If we get to a place where we're talking about you 98 point whatever percent Ghanaian, maybe we can start having a conversation about you might want to look up Shwe or Ashanti or Ashanti Shwe or start looking at persons who talk about Onyon Capone or whatever. You might want to learn some of that stuff. You might want to figure out if your name is, Kwame or Kinte or Kofi or Yao or you might you might want to invest in some of that. We might be there's something there, right? If we on that level most of the time, but once again, there's no guarantee. That's why you have to learn something about your story. You have to learn, even if you barely know something, learn something about mom and dads, learn something about grandparents, at least learn what part of the country maybe they started off in and where they came from, because then at least maybe you can start figuring out, like for example, if you're somebody in Chicago, more than likely, right, so-called black person in Chicago, more than likely, you got some Choctaw in you, right? Or even, you don't know, Mississippi is not just a state. Mississippi is also a nation. It's actually a Native American name, right? So Mississippians are there, right? Or if you're somebody that's up in Chicago, you might want to look at some Seminole up there. You might want to look at some. I said Choctaw, Seminole. What's the other one? I'm forgetting. Some Creek, some Foot. Matter of fact, what the some Muskogee. Yeah, because there was a whole bunch of persons that went up there, right? So if you know that, you might figure out that's. And by the way, this is why a lot of you, even going to the west, a lot of you have a lot of southern sounding stuff in your so-called AAVE, right? It's not a black accent thing. It's not just trying to be. You were raised in an environment to where you do the th thing, right? Where your th words sound like d, so you don't say the, you say duh. You don't say what's up with that. You say what's up with that, right? These are things that came from stuff to where you were actually dealing with stuff down south. And even if you know about the Trail of Tears and you deal with some stuff now in Oklahoma and different things like that, right? So some of you are more traveled, even if you're talking about Cherokee or Anakitawayach, right? Or if you're talking about the influence, even a lot of persons forget the Seminole Wars were going on the same time that the Gullah Geechee Wars are going on. So we're fighting together even in that. So a lot of persons who are enslaved are even Africans with Gullah Geechee, who are also mixed with Native American stuff, but also Seminoles who are Africans and Native Americans mixed together as well, right? Then don't forget about Melungeons, who are persons who can be part so-called white, part so-called Black American, Native American, and so-called Black African. Right, so you'll find that if you start getting into this stuff, you can actually start finding a lot about you and a lot about who you are, and even other nations that you wouldn't necessarily consider yourself to be a part of, but are actually cousins. So anybody that's Choctaw, and I'm, what we now call Cherokee, Anakitawayach, is the specific type of my nation, specific name of my nation, the original name. But that being said, if you say Cherokee and you say Choctaw, we're cousins. Off the rip, we're family. And we have similarities, and we'll have similarities in speech, and we'll feel more comfortable around in person, right? Just because we've done a little bit of research and we've walked in and done some stuff, right? That's the importance of nationality. This whole thing of a birth certificate, where you think where you were born talks about who you are, is trash. You a cousin too, right? Yeah. Or if you go up north, Wampanoag, right? Wampanoag, extremely important, because you're talking about persons that are attached to the whole story of Tisquantum and all those persons who were coming in and when they were getting slaves from there, way before you think they were. So there's a lot of stuff that we can see if you're talking about the not the Moor, not the Moroccan, not the Moreno. I said so many M words. I'm messing myself up now. Those who were in Jamaica and those who were in Haiti, right, who were in the hills, who were never taken over. And literally have nations that have never, especially in Haiti. In Haiti, there's a place where nobody's ever taken over them, and they've been free the whole time. Maroons, thank you. All these, like, when you start seeing, even if you see it, some of y'all think it's just a random thing or whatever, Jamaica Ave and stuff like that. No, Jamaicans used to be considered to not just be from this island you call Jamaica. They were called Jamaicans because they looked like Jamaicans, but Jamaicans were considered to be persons that went not just from the Caribbean, but go all the way up into Canada. Have you ever noticed that, even though I know some of them were born so-called with persons, but have you noticed that there's person with Jamaican accents that were never born in Jamaica? And not just because their parents have Jamaican accent. Do a little bit of research. You'd be surprised. So you'll find out more about yourself and more about your family and start linking up with persons just because you go through stuff. But because we have a birth certificate mind, it becomes difficult, because we're thinking, oh, okay, well, if I wasn't born there, I can't be there. That's not how that works. It's not. I know that's what they try to teach you, but that's not how it works. It didn't work like that until you believe the lie that your birth certificate and therefore where you were born was more important than who you were born from. But even on your birth certificate, they try to get you to sign up and say they try to get your parents to sign off on being artificial persons and get you to be an artificial person. On your passport, it says clearly you can say that your parents are not, it's by what you believe. You can put on there and say they're not American citizen. On DS11, we're talking about an American form here. You can put on there, click like they are not American citizens. They are not citizens of the United States of America. And if so, that's a big part of making sure that you can be a non-citizen national. Now, once again, don't just go on here and doing pieces of it and you haven't studied how to do this, right? I'm not here telling you, if you followed it, this is not me giving you suggestions on how to do blah, blah, whatever. I must say that this is for educational purposes only. This is for spiritual purposes only. That being said, a lot of you don't recognize how this works, how the system has to back up what you decree. When you decree who you are, then they have to treat you as who you are. But what's happened is you've been taught to be what they have told you, which is an artificial person, to be part of a corporation. The United States is a corporation. 28 USC 30015 subsection A tells you that that's United States code, by the way. So United States law confirms that the United States is a corporation. If you look up law, Black's Law Dictionary to be specific, and look up Washington, D.C., Washington, D.C. is not a state. It is a territory. This is why there will always be taxation without representation, because a U.S. territory is the same as saying a UK colony. It doesn't belong to them. It's not something where you're supposed to be autonomous. A state is a country. The federal government is the corporation. So anybody who's attaching to the federal government, when you do federal things, that's artificial, that's corporative. But when you do stuff through the state is supposed to be a country. Now you still have to be careful whether the state is moving in a corporate fashion, right, or in a natural capacity. You still have to be careful as far as how they're moving. But you have to recognize that this stuff is done. But we are taught these things, and we're taught, even when it comes to scripture, we're not taught that back then in scripture, they're not, right? In scripture, it is important to know who you belong to and to have paperwork vouching who you are. But in scripture, there is no such thing as a birth certificate. Do you hear what I'm saying, right? Catch that, beloved. In scripture, there is no, just like in scripture, there's no such thing as dating. The Vakapadansh, have your way. Man, your people grasp this, right? Look. In scripture, there's no such thing as dating. So if you're looking for dating advice in the scripture, or you're trying to be of a culture that dates, you cannot be of a scriptural culture. You cannot be of a kingdom nation. You cannot be Yahadasha'al, because in Israel, you don't date. You're taught on what it is to be a husband and wife. You have to be confirmed by a council on what it is, as far as them saying you're a man or a woman and of legal age, bar mitzvah, bat mitzvah. Then you have to go from that to then being confirmed on what a husband and wife is. That's why he who finds a wife finds a great thing. And in order to find a wife, you have to be qualified as a husband. And then you have to be taught what a mother and father is. The husband is given his inheritance, even though he's not married to a physical woman. He's married to the Most High. He's been trained properly. And so now with his inheritance, doing what his father does and having been trained from birth to be a husband and to be a father and to be a man, he now operates in that. And in his business, realizing it's not about to be alone, he realizes, wait a minute, just like Adam was given a responsibility, name all the animals. And in naming all the animals, he saw the importance of a helpmeet. When the man in our culture is put in a position to do what his father says and to continue his father's work and to see all the things and be raised with, in our case, it's supposed to be raised with a father and mother that are righteous. When we get our own work, we realize the necessity of a wife. Here I am doing all this stuff in the field, so to speak, and I'm doing all this work and doing all this stuff, and here it is that I don't have a wife like Daddy had. It's more difficult to run stuff. It'd be nice to have some children running around that had my name and continued our name. It'd be nice to have something to give this to. He realizes, because of the way he's been trained, taught, and what he's been around, the respect and the necessity of a wife, and he will respect her. And when he finds a wife that will help him to multiply as a helpmeet, what it is that he's been called to do, he will want to protect her, and he will need her, and he will go to her, and he will honor her, and he will say, hey, I will make sure that anything is possible, including giving my life for you, is there for you, as long as you would help me to multiply what I've been called to do. The wife has been trained to be the same thing, and when she's found, guess what? She'll have different type of language and everything, because she'll comprehend. She's supposed to only off or kill off things, if you will, that are her husband's, or that are on her husband, that are negative to what Yah has for him, and she's supposed to uplift and exhort anything else. This is why Proverbs 18:21 and 22 go together. You only talk about Proverbs 18:21, which is death and life is in the power of the tongue, but those that love it will eat the fruit thereof. However, the next verse says, right, and he who finds a wife finds something that is tabah, or excellent, or righteous, and therefore finds what? Something that helps him to obtain favor from Adam. Put the two together, and when a husband who's in his work, you got to read even past that in Proverbs 18. Go back to Proverbs 18, like 14, 15, and read on down through 22. You'll discover that most of that is talking about a husband who's in his work, is wise, is following the word, is doing what he's supposed to, and because he's doing what he's supposed to, he'll run into a wife who is somebody who speaks positive things over him, right, to help to and bless him and keep him in that regard, right, and at the same time will make sure that she speaks death over the things that need to be off in his life. So therefore, we shouldn't be upset when a wife says something that says you need to change this, because if she's saying you need to change, she's saying this thing is causing death and will keep you away from your calling and will keep your family from not being where it's supposed to be. You see, this is culture. This is nationality. I'm trying to show you this is not just something that you say on a Sunday. It's not just something you use when you get in a fight. This is an everyday, every second, every moment grind. If you're going to be a husband or a wife called by the Most High, then you need to go ahead and make sure that that Proverbs 31 woman isn't something that you just do or putting on every once in a while when you get invited to a conference. If you're going to be the king of the castle, right, King Kong out here, and he ain't got nothing on you or whatever, then you need to make sure that's something that you do every day. And if not, then this is not your nationality. This is just something that's a costume for you. Right? It's December the 19th, 2025. You just put this on because it would be nice to wear. You've been invited to an event. It'd be nice to wear. It'd be nice to wear great husband for a day. It'd be nice to put on great wife for a day, right? Or even for a few hours. And once our few hours is up at church, then we're going to go ahead and argue and fuss. Right? Once we've had our meeting, we'll go ahead and go right back to being what we're supposed to be. Once we've done a live session, right, we'll go ahead and go right back to being abusive verbally, physically, mentally, emotionally. Not caring about the mental health of our spouse, or not caring about the bills that need to be paid, or not caring about the fact that everybody's stressed out. See, this is nationality. Now, somebody might say, you seem like you veered way off. I promise you I'm happy, because I'm trying to show you how nations work. It doesn't matter where you're from. It matters who you are from. See, this is why if you're Yahweh's child, you can be put anywhere on the planet and still be his child. Why? Because it doesn't matter where you're born. It matters who you're born from. If I am born again and I belong to the Most High, then I'm not of the United States. I'm in it. Come on, somebody. If I'm Yahweh's child and you put me in Ghana, well, guess what? I'm not of Ghana. I'm just in it. Oh, don't miss it. Right? You can put me in Maryland. I'm not of Maryland. I'm in it. This is culture. This is nation. So you have to recognize how nationality works, because everything else we're going to talk about is nationality. That's right. Even though we're scattered, you still Israel. Now back to the Negro. Why is 1490 so important? Why are we mentioning these dates of 1300s? Okay, nation, nationality. Here we go. Nationality. You with me? I know that's a lot. I told you. I got a lot of stuff going through. I promise you. Just stay with us. We're going to get it together. Right? All right? Nationality is different. Just because you're black doesn't mean you're a nation. There are nations that have the word black in it. If you're Kemet, they believe that they're for the black sands. There's people who even call themselves slippery blacks, right? Believe it or not. There are blue blacks. They call themselves these things. I'm not telling you what I heard. I'm telling you what they say about themselves. Even the word Moor, even though it's been turned into stuff, but you could say Moor means black, but Moor is not always a nation, depending on which nation is calling themselves Moor, right? You could talk about I forget what the name is for the Japanese and for the Japanese and the original Asiatics, especially in some of the islands, especially like the Negritos, the Filipinos, stuff like that, and what they call themselves, but their name refers to black. Aboriginals of Australia, their original name, some of them, there's different tribes, nations, but their name refers to black. Right? Khalifa, Californians, the original Native American California people, their name actually, part of that means black. Right? We can go on. Kush, Ethiopia, South Sudan, right? Even Sheba's kingdom stretched all the way into, what you call Middle East today, right? They consider themselves to be black. Kush actually means black. Ethiopia means persons of the black, persons who have been burnt by the sun. That's what they're calling themselves. Or even the Greeks, the Kush, Nubia are these African names, the more indigenous names, right? Ethiopia is the Greek name. By the way, even Greeks themselves, they were not a country at one point, and many of them, right, they didn't consider themselves to be them. They didn't consider themselves to be as dark. But you have to look at Alexander the Great's father, Philip. He's considered to be swarthy. You would call that today black. right? Look at, I know swarthy just means dark color, so you at least got to say POC, right? Which means Alexander the Great wasn't Colin Farrell. We know what Queen Ty looked like. We know what Nefertiti actually looked like. And we know who changed it up in the early 1900s. We know what King Tut actually looked like, right? We know what these pharaohs' hair looked like, okay? But that doesn't mean you're the same nation. Because just because Moses could be hidden in Kemet, or Joseph, his brothers couldn't tell the difference between him and Kemetic persons, even though they were blood, right? Or even Yehoshua, the Messiah, was hidden in Kemet, not because he was white, so-called white. That being said, just because they were put in lands with so-called black persons doesn't mean we consider them to be the same nation, does it? I need you to catch this. It's going to be important as we go through this, because you got to comprehend the spiritual nature of this thing, and that the devil is trying to get you to hate the Negro and Negroid features because of who the Negro is. If you comprehend that part, then the rest is going to begin to make a lot more sense. How you doing, Sister Rose, Black Rose, right? And thank y'all for the love. Thank you for being on all the different platforms, right? So I need you to catch that Negro did not initially mean black. So we got to figure out who these Negroes are. If you figure out who that is in their origin, then this stuff makes more sense. Salah. That means pause and think about it. Salah. All right. Are you with me? I know we bounced around. I'm not finished. I told you it's going to be a long answer. Right? I told you it's going to be a long answer, but are you with me? You catch what I'm saying? You catch what I'm putting down? I'm not trying to say that because, once again, I think I'm all that. I want to make sure we're on the same page. Right? I want to make sure we're on the same page. Everybody with us? Any questions, comments, or concerns? Right? You Barak? You in a place where you comprehend all that stuff? I don't want to leave. We're gonna be Republican for a second. No child left behind. I'm not Republican or Democrat, by the way. Sorry if you take that as some kind of offense. All right. And how you doing? Is it Smoots Operator? I was just listening to that the other day. All right. Hadn't heard that song in a long time. Right? Okay. So here we go. Is it Bow Wow Baby? I don't know if that's how you say it, pronounce it. All right. So here we go. Let's get this in. Let's. So now that we get this together, and we know nationality is what we're talking about. We're not talking about your color or your skin only. Okay? It never was supposed to be that. If you know how nationality works, it doesn't mean that the blacker you are, the better you are, the whiter you are, the better you are. That's not how nations work. Any nation based upon that, you're looking at something that actually started out very Greco-Roman, but also is something that has been exacerbated through chattel slavery. Okay? That's not biblical. It's not biblical to reverse it now. That's why I said we have to be careful about who we pull this stuff from. And a lot of us are pulling stuff from other persons who taught us how to dismiss. This is how you'll have conversations where, oh, well, why does it matter the color of the Messiah? It's like, well, y'all said it mattered for, hundreds of years. Now all of a sudden we say we find evidence to the contrary, and that you're using iconoclasm to make him an icon more so than to make him Christ. And to make him an icon in your image, to make him look like Cesare Borgia. All that we know what happened over time. We know that we can go to places that still exist to this day and see a whole bunch of Christ. The further back we go, a bunch of Christ and a bunch of Christ statues and all this stuff or whatever, and he don't look like what you told us he looked like, even in European places, where persons still go to worship and bow down to, now they're bowing down to idols, right? But nevertheless, they're bowing down to Christ that are bare minimum copper colored. So if somebody's telling us this stuff doesn't matter, then we got to be like, well, why doesn't it matter now? It mattered so much to build upon this weird chattel slavery behavior. Now it doesn't matter when we're saying that we want to come out. And the reason is because persons believe, once again, that we're going to use the same doctrine that they gave us. Because if Christ being so-called white made it better for them to be white, then their belief system is Christ being so-called black is going to make it better for us just because we're black. And that's not how our nationality keeps the word. That's what they are afraid of. And when I say they, I mean anybody big up in racism, white supremacy, right? That's what they're afraid of. They're afraid because they came up with the lost cause, doctrine of discovery, manifest destiny, white man's burden, Darwinism, Linnaean doctrine, evolution, um, um, Galton and eugenics, IQ test, EQ, all these different things. The reality is they've been and still are in the society that they want you to be in, but we shouldn't be of. They believe that if you ever come out of that, their mindset is, well, we taught them that color is the only thing that matters. And so if Christ becomes black, then it means that they'll try to attack us. This is not our heart. This is not our position. And really, we're trying to figure out how to separate. If you leave us alone, because this is what the nation's supposed to be getting ready for. If you would leave us alone, y'all's going to be the one to judge. I would suggest that you make sure you're ready for his judgment. And if you really want to truly be ready for his judgment, you need to deny your flesh and deny those persons who you say you are from, and make sure that you are actually from the Most High. And if you're actually from the Most High, then be ready to go ahead and actually graft in with us. Because as much as you want to try and deny who we are and say it doesn't matter, I'm here to tell you it matters a whole lot. Because the Bible says in Romans chapter 11, you can't get rid of us. Elohim forbid. And we're the tree that you must be grafting to. That means you should be more concerned about becoming my family because I follow the Most High, rather than trying to deny me my birthright because it can't be denied. Uh-oh. All right. So watch this. Now that we got nationality together, that's what you should be teaching and preaching and learning about. Know the law greater than the scribes and the Pharisees. A lot of these persons who are out, including our own Hebrew Israelite brethren, a lot of them are not teaching nationality because they don't know how nations work. They don't care about how kingdom works. They just want to dominate you. But instead of saying JC, they want to be able to say Yeshua, Yahushua, Yahweh, etc., and be able to dominate you. No. Right? It's going to be kingdom standard. It's going to be kingdom understanding. It's going to be, in all my getting, I lean not to my own understanding, but get his standard to be under. All right. So 1491, the last great Moorish king loses. It's important to know that the Moors had power from 1491 and go all the way back into the 700s. I believe the mid 700s. I could be off on that. Right. So from 1491 or 1492, depending on which one you want to use, either way, we're talking the same area, right? The same arena. From that to the mid 700s, you're talking about basically what, 700 years, 700 to 800 years of power. 700 to 800 years of power that was with the Moors, right? That means Spain was not considered to be what you today would call European. Matter of fact, Europe didn't even exist yet. And Eurasia is not a real thing either. A continent is a large landmass completely surrounded by water. If Africa, Asia, and Europe are all connected, they're not separate continents. Did you catch me on that? See, we're going to talk about nationality. We're going to talk about kingdom. We're going to talk about truth. You got to come out the world. See, some of us are still in worldly mindset, trying to not be of it. Transform your mind. The transformation of your mind. Be not conformed to this world, but be transformed, by the renewal of your mind. A continent is what? A large landmass completely surrounded by water, which means that if you just look at the surface, there cannot be 7 continents. There can only be 4. You have Antarctica, which, by the way, I just learned this recently. Cool fact. I like little facts. Arctic means bear. So if you go to Arctic, you're talking about where bears are. And if you go to Antarctic or anti-Arctic, Antarctica, then you're going to where there's no bears. And where bears are, there are no penguins. And where penguins are, there are no bears. That's all Antarctica means. I just found that out. That's my little nerdy, geeky thing. I was telling my wife about that. I was all excited. I ran down the steps and everything. I was trying to tell her that she's a miss of trying to cook and do some other stuff that we need that actually needs to get done for the household and stuff like that. And I'm running down talking about penguins. But that's real talk. That's what it means. Anyways, so but Antarctica is a continent, right? Large landmass completely surrounded by water. Australia is a continent, large landmass completely surrounded by water, right? Okay, and then North America, South America are connected. Is that correct? Go look at a map real quick. And don't give me, and see, we gotta be careful with man. Don't give me, oh well, man took a little chunk out of it so that ships could pass through. Mm-mm. North America and South America are connected. Is that correct? Yes. So that means that you're dealing with one continent as a whole. North America and South America, Turtle Island, it's one. So we have three continents. And then Africa, Asia, and Europe are all connected by land. That's four continents. But that's above water. Now, peep game. All land, unless there is some land that's floating, but if it's even islands, right? All land that we have that is stable, right? All land that's stable, there might be some that float, if we be honest. Very rare, but there is some. Right? But all the land that you walk on and live on and stuff, except for man-made stuff, some of that stuff is not obviously not real either. But all land that is considered to be there is connected underneath the water because at one point, even the Bible declares that at one point all the land was together in something that in scientific communities they still call Pangea, right? Pangea was one continent. Then the flood happened, and if you look at even the names, right, this is why you got to know the story of your people, know your language, right? You had Noah, Shem, the lineage that we focus on, right? Noah, Shem, out of Shem, out of it's really more like Arvaquad, but you know what we say Arphaxad, which is used there for today, Arphaxad, Salah, Avda or Hebrew, and then Hebrew, right? And if you don't know what I'm doing here, Noah, Na'ah, Noah, his name means to rest, right? Na'ah is to rest. His wife's name, Naaman, is actually like a beautiful flower or something like that. But Na'ah or Noah's name is to rest, right? Then he gives birth, one of his sons, the one we're going to focus on, Sham or Shem, his name means name. It means authorized. It means authority. It means to be named, okay? Then Shem gives birth to Arphaxad. Arphaxad is one who actually doubts himself. But by the end of his life, he must find out who he really is and be okay with it because he has a son he names Salah, which means to pause and think about it to the point of trying to get growth. And then Salah has a son. His name is Avda, or what you call Hebrew, in even African, West African, you might say Ivrit, which also too is known as Igbo, which means that those persons are connected. See who the Negro is. I haven't even gotten to the Negro part, but are you seeing there's some connections here? Right? If you know what's going on, you know what's going on. We don't have a clue because we can't connect it, right? So now that I get to Hebrew, right, which also means his name means to expand. It means to be able to expand, you can't stop him from expansion. That's why even if you are not Israelite, if you're a Hebrew, a lot of our people, you can't stop us from expanding. Right? That barak, that authority is upon you. Okay. Now, after that is a son. There's two sons, but the second son's name is Pelag or Peleg in your Bible. If you look up that name, his name refers to when the earth split, meaning that the earth before the flood, and by the way, if you don't know how long the flood went, we only think about 40 days, 40 nights of rain, and then sometimes you think about, if you think about they were on the ships for 6 months. But here's the deal. When everything started, there were 2 weeks about where water started coming up from underneath and fissures started to explode. And by the way, before rain, that's how the earth was watered, from the water in the reservoirs from underneath. And then after that, then you started to see rain come down simultaneously. And that was going on for 40 days and 40 nights. It wasn't just all of a sudden it just started raining. Right? So when the persons are running to the ark, they've already been dealing with water coming up over and over and over again and rain coming down. Right? Look at the book of Jasher, right? Look at Jasher, look at Chronicles of Noah, look at Genesis. Okay, they're going to touch and agree. Say the same thing to you, right? Look at Jubilee. Going to touch and agree. Okay, so all that's going on simultaneously, and then what happens is what? Then and then after that, the water did not recede for 6 months. So for 6 months, all this stuff and all this loose earth and all this stuff that's been shaken up all over the place, you're sitting there, right, in this waters. Then when the waters came down, it still took a long time for it to come down and recede. And then even when it came down, they still weren't allowed to get out the ark. A lot of you think like, oh, okay, no, just they put birds out, they did all this stuff. But then after that, it says that they came through the top window. They actually, it wasn't just the top window. They had like a whole thing they could like roll back apparently on the top of the ark, and or not the whole top, but a huge chunk, and they could come up from the top, and they started looking down, right? But they weren't allowed to step outside, right? They weren't allowed to go back on the dry land yet. So they, for a long time, if you do all the math and put it together, they were on the ark for 14 months. What do you think that would do to a solid surface? Anybody ever seen a snow globe with all that silt in it or whatever they put in it, and you shake it up? What happens to the solid surface on the inside? What happens to the silt? Right? It starts to fracture. Even if you were to just take it and move it slightly, some of the stuff is going to move. So you have a whole bunch of water with fissures that came up with all the stuff or whatever. Yeah, these things were connected together. And if that's why when you go to Genesis chapter 2, you'll be like, well, this river says it's over here in India. And this river says it's in Babylon. And this river says it's in, and you don't realize if you just put Pangea back together, you'll discover that all the rivers show you exactly where the Garden of Eden was. Mostly in North Africa, but even went into what some of you call the Middle East. And you also realize that there's truth. And Eden actually went from South America all the way over to, what you call the Middle East and through that. So a lot of Africa was Eden, but the Garden of Eden is actually like Northeast Africa. How you doing, Sister Casey? Right? So when you realize who you are and what it's saying and what the authorities are and stuff like that, you'll start to recognize who you are. So once again, now go back to 1491, 1492, whichever one you decide, and you go back 700 plus years, and you'll discover that the Moors were over the territory of what you call Spain for hundreds of years, 700 plus years. But let's not forget that even before that, right, because we just think about Greece and Rome. Before Greece and before Rome, and even during the times, but, as far as who was the big dog, if you will, there's a war, right, that happens especially with the Romans, right? It's called Carthaginians. The Carthaginians, and they go through they go through a war called the Punic Wars. It really would be the Punic or the Phonic Wars. This is where you get phonic or Phoenician sounds. You catching this? The phonic, the Punic, the Punic. See, Romans didn't care. If you didn't speak the main languages that they wanted you to speak, they called your stuff, like we would call chatter. We would say, like, somebody says, oh man, that person's speaking, man, they blah, 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 blah. They don't speak English, blah, 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 blah. Or they were speaking, foolish people be like, they speaking that Mexican stuff, and they don't know how to speak no Spanish, right? Especially Mexican dialect, right? But the Romans that were just as disrespectful. So what they would do is they would say, man, instead of that person sounded like blah, 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 they would say they sounded like bar, 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 bar. Hence the term barbarian. If you weren't on their level of speech, so they thought, then you are a barbarian. Not just only because of what you do, that eventually becomes grafted into the thought process of it, but because of how you speak. And if you don't speak, like they said, this is America. What are you speaking that Afrocentric stuff for, boy? This is America. What are you speaking that Spanish stuff for, girl? This is America. What you sitting up here talking about that Allah stuff there, boy? Right? The xenophobia, the bigotry. It's a holdover from who their fathers are. Right? Not trying to be mean with that. I'm giving you game. Right? It's a holdover. If you believe that you need to be romantic and romanticize stuff, then yeah, your fathers in Rome, they did the same thing. And so it wasn't called the Punic Wars. It was called the Phonic Wars. Some of you would even argue, most persons would argue the Punic Wars, but the reason you use phonic sounds, right? Hooked on phonics. You want to make sure that you get things right phonetically, is because of It's because of the wars that were given them. It's the truth, right? We don't think about it that way once again because we don't think about nationality. See, once you get into nationality, this stuff makes more sense. So the reason why I bring up the Carthaginians is because the Carthaginians were over Spain and other areas for thousands of years. So much so that when the Punic or Phonic or Punic wars were going on, the Carthaginians, at one point, Hannibal's father, right? Hannibal's father, who also was a Hannibal as well, but Hannibal's father had put together stuff in their military because their military wasn't based off of persons that were homegrown, but at the time that they in their military they would hire out right thugs, basically, or not thugs. I'm sorry, hired thugs or what they call mercenaries, right? And so they would hire them out, and so basically they didn't have the same values, and so they kind of lost due to that. And Carthaginian was basically thrown in the towel and was going to start paying tribute, but Hannibal's father never was cool with that, and so he went. During all this time, he went to the new capital of Carthage. And if you don't know what Carthage is, which once again you think of Carthage, you don't know where Carthage is North Africa, basically. Basically, North Africa, right? The top of North Africa, right? Not necessarily Kemet, kind of touching and bordering it, but pretty much think North Africa, even on the map the way you see it today. Like look at kind of like the top of it, not getting anywhere close to what they call the Saharan or sub-Saharan part, right? But at the top of it, skimming kind of across the top, that was Carthage. And Carthage had a lot more than just that, though. Guess where they moved their capital to when the war got rough? They moved their capital of Carthage to Spain. See, a lot of us don't know that. So the Spanish speak a lot of African. We're just not aware. If you're not aware with this, for example, what is the word Spanish? The word for family in Spanish. How do you say that? Right? Habla español, porquito. Right? ¿Cómo se dice family in español? How do you say family in Spanish? Familia. Right? Familia. Right? Here's the deal. That's not a Spanish word. That's Kiswahili. So you really should say "Como se dice family" in Kiswahili, and you would say "familia." It's a African. It's a Kiswahili. It's a business language. It's not Spanish. It's Kiswahili. It's just not. Right? Like à la français, right? Parlez-vous français? In French. À la français, comment est-ce qu'on dit? How do you say? What's the word? Let's do one. Comment est-ce qu'on dit shirt à la français? Do you know how to say shirt in French? Anybody know? Comment est-ce qu'on dit shirt à la français? Right? How do you say shirt in the French language? If you don't know, you would say chemise. In Espanol, you might say camisa. Now that's more like, oh no, camisa. Yeah, for sure. Camiseta is a t-shirt, right? So you might say camisa, shirt, right? En français, chemise, right? Shirt. That's not a Spanish or French word. That's Kiswahili. It existed before, right? The persons who were from Africa, the Moors, if you will, back then the Carthaginians, right, who were up there, the persons who were in power, they're the ones whose language is the barometer. Once again, we're talking nationality. If you don't comprehend this, for example, if you were to go to, like a lot of persons don't realize this, so in English, let's in English, right? Even though English is English, kind of sort of Anglo. It's not really English doesn't truly, what you think English is supposed to mean doesn't really exist. That being said, what we call English, right? English has 40% at least French in it. So, for example, anytime I say motivation, I'm saying motivation. It's a French word. If I say, anytime I put a T-I-O-N on the word, which makes it a noun, that's a French thought process, which is a Gallic, Germanic process. But the French are actually a mix between those of the languages of Rome and the languages of the Gauls, Germanic languages, right? So if I say motivation, that's motivation, right? If I say temptation, that's temptation, right? Any of that, any of those words, right? That's what's going on there, right? Now that being said, right, in French, there's also something that happens, or in English, there's something that happens that we're not aware, that you're basically either talking about Gauls or Germanic persons, or French, which are Germanic persons who kind of sold out and were, the puppet state of Rome. So when William the Conqueror, who took over, who was really William the Bastard until he took over England, and he brought over French persons with him, anything that the royal sense of those persons who were his boys, who he put in power, right? Whatever language they spoke was the language of the high persons, and English was the language of the poor, which was Germanic holdovers from the Germanic language they spoke. What does that mean? That means that, for example, do you eat cow? We're talking about how nations work. I promise you, we're going somewhere. I just need you to comprehend nation. We're gonna land where you ask this. I promise you. But just, if you will, just follow me, because once this hits, the rest of this ain't gonna be but me just telling you information. I'm just trying to get you to comprehend how nations work and why we have a really hard time with this and all these theories and stuff that are popping up. Question: do you eat cow? Basic question. Somebody help me in the chat if you don't mind, real quick. Does anybody in here eat cow? Or do you know people? Is it acceptable to eat cow? Yes. Okay. Watch this. But when you eat it, you don't call it cow, do you? What do you call it? If somebody were to say, "I'm gonna feed you cow," you'd be like, "That's weird. You don't say that, right?" What do you call it when it's on your plate? You call it beef, right? Cow is Germanic language from those who were enslaved and were captured and were offed in genocide. Beef is a French word, buff. So the right, even when you hear a person say "in the buff" when they're talking about in the nude, that's because cows don't wear clothes. That's all they say. So, so when somebody is eating beef, you're eating cow. But see, poor folk can't afford to just have their cow be ate because they need their cow. They might need cow's milk. They might need to sell the milk. They might need to make sure that the cow can be passed on to the next generation, since they don't really have land like that. So they don't just get rid of cows, right? But beef is for rich folk at that time. Rich folk, the ones that are coming over, they can afford to have as many cows as they want slaughtered. So cow and beef, right? It depends. You're talking about culture. Two cultures that are competing. And poor folk don't eat cow anymore because they want to be like rich folks. So when they can afford to eat cow, they don't eat cow, they eat beef. Although they're the same thing, right? This is why you have even holdovers in other countries, other languages. In Spanish, there's a difference between pez and pescado. Pez y pescado, right? Right? Una es comida, una es no comida, right? One is food, one is not food. One is what, right? You would one you don't, even if somebody were to say that they're going to feed you the one that's not food, it wouldn't make sense in the language, right? You don't say it like that, right? There's mouton and there's lamb, or there's mouton and there's sheep. You don't eat sheep. You eat mouton, right? Chicken is one of those that, for whatever reason, I think that sticks. Either way, right? But that's the reason why you think like that, is because somebody's doing something that's a nationality. There's a country, there's a culture involved. You follow? So the things that they're speaking in Spain are not Spanish. I mean, if you want to use Spanish as kind of sort of become their culture, I guess. But they're not saying Negro because Negro means black, or because Negro was a Spanish word. They're saying Negro because Africans who were there, including actual Negroes, used this to determine who they were as a nation. A Negro is different. Not every Negro. That's why they don't say Everybody has Negro features. A lot of these so-called historians said that they found persons who had Negroid features, meaning that they were not Negro, but they had features that reminded them of Negroes. Well, poultry. I'm sorry for chicken. You're right. I'm saying. I guess. Excuse me. You're correct. In the context I was speaking. In modern times, people just say chicken and chicken. They don't really say poultry like that anymore. But technically, yeah, there's a difference between poultry and chicken. Right. Right. But hear what I'm saying. Right. So if you get this context, Negro is not a Spanish word. And Negro does not mean black in its origin. It has become that because persons have enslaved black folk who had Negroid features and they began to forget, like many persons will call you these things, right? Like, for example, when they call you, I'm going to say a curse word, I'm going to say a heavy word, okay? I'm going to just say it once, but I'm going to say a curse word, I'm going to say a heavy word, or I guess I'll say it a couple times to give you some reference, okay? Trigger warning. I'm not calling anybody this. I'm about to just use a word, okay? I know this hurts for many to hear this word, all right? This is why they called you nigger. And some of you use the word nigga. And you've been taught to try and keep nigger around to make you feel down or to make you feel out of place. You've been taught that nigga helped you to keep power. But the reality is that the word nigga is just once again using these terms we use with black scent and AAVE and getting into etymology that has to do with so-called ebonics and stuff like that. But not just that, as far as just Southern sensibilities in speaking, right? And American sensibilities, even if you talk about New York and stuff. A lot of places they don't say that, just like they don't say the TH I was talking about earlier, they'll say the D, right? So they won't say this, they'll say this. They won't say that, they'll say that, this and that, right? They also do something on the end in a lot of these places, and a lot of so-called black speaking, or persons that speak with so-called black scent, right? Who actually are native to the black scent, if you will, or it's indigenous black scent, if you will, right? If we want to use these terms, you'll discover that at the end of a lot of words, we remove the er and we just say ah. When somebody says, "Man, he's a thinker," in our community, they might say, "Man, he a thinker," right? If somebody says, that's bigger, they say, "Man, that's bigger. That's bigger than that," right? That's a sign of where we come from in the culture, right? And cultural reference points and things even that we might have had is not because we're uneducated, it's just because we say things differently, right? It's not you heard to me, is you heard me? You heard me, right? Some places it's herbs, some places it's herbs, right? So when you're using when you see that er thing even come on there, and that a thing, that's a sign of who you come from. Even the fact that you say and, you know how our people go, and this. Like, man, I was going through some stuff the other day, and I happened to go to the store, and I ran into Tommy, and Tommy was sitting up there talking about some stuff, and I couldn't really hear it at that moment in time. And I listened though, and finally I had to say something to him, and I wasn't trying to be mean, right? That's a holdover from the fact that in Hebrew, you used to say at all the time, which is a way of saying and. It means a whole lot more than that, but it's a holdover. And at actually means that you are starting a new sentence. See, in Hebrew, in actual Hebrew, not this modern stuff and stuff that we're trying to call ancient and stuff. No, in the actual Avda, the original Hebrew, we don't have punctuation marks. And I know I've gone over time, the normal time. Once again, we normally end at 11 a.m. New York time. It's Q&A today, and I'm gonna make sure I at least finish this question so we can be ready for later on. All right. So thank you for being on. And if we don't catch you, if you got to get off for some reason, don't forget, sisters, you have the women's meeting tonight with Elder Maya at 7 p.m. New York time before the live session tonight. All right. All right. But let's finish up. Let's finish strong. Okay. I'm gonna try my best to get it in like the 11:15, 11:20 area, but I'm gonna be honest, y'all can see we're gonna land it properly, but I'm just trying to show you nationality. See, when I say the rest of the stuff, it's just gonna be information, right? The rest of it's gonna be easy. Now you just be like, oh, okay, I get it. It's nation. The nation is different. We're looking at it different. We're looking at color, now nationality. All right. So when you talk about nationality, right? We don't know that the reason we even say and a lot, or we don't know why we like red in a lot of places. Like, when you go down south and when you go certain places and you see a lot of red doors and stuff, do you know that if somebody had a red door, that was a Gullah Geechee and Seminole and a so-called black way Native American way and Hebrew way, etc., to be able to say that you owned it. So somebody had red in a lot of places. It wasn't just because of the blood of Christ. If you saw red carpet, it wasn't just because of the blood of Christ. They were saying, we own this. Did you know that? You see what I'm saying? Culture, nationality, how your nation operates. We are not aware of this. So we're going through, and I'm not saying we can't say yes, the blood of Christ and all, but I'm saying if you go in certain churches of a certain ilk, of a certain age, especially if it's black folk that shouldn't be able to afford what they afforded, and some of them were slaves, but they were allowed to be free in service. And so even though they couldn't be free anywhere else, they could at least say that they had ownership over this building. Even if they didn't know the ways of Christ all the way they should, that's a holdover from culture. Of course, we know that the blood of Christ still works, right? We can be dipped down in crimson and come out as bright or as clear or as so-called white as snow. But when you see the red, a lot of times that's not them saying the blood of Christ. They're saying we own this. We're proud of the fact that we own this. We shouldn't have been able to own this. The only reason we own this is because of Christ, is what they're saying. It's a cultural reference point. But many persons now will say, hey man, when we do stuff and you just do it traditionally, let's put out red carpet, let's put a red door, let's do this red. No, that was a sign from our ancestors that we took it seriously, that Christ allowed us to be able to own this. This is why when we get to things like December 31st, we don't do New Year's Eve service, we're going to do Watch Night, because Watch Night is culturally relevant. It's culturally relevant in the way that Juneteenth is culturally relevant. But if nobody's taught this to us, once again, Scripture says, anyone who calls upon the name of Yehoshua, they shall be saved. But how can one be saved if they don't believe this? And how can they believe what they have not heard? And how can you hear it if it's not preached? And how can it be preached if the preachers are not sent by the Most High? For how beautiful the feet of those who walk in Amat, who walk in truth, who walk in the way. Therefore, who shall believe our report, as Isaiah said? That's Romans chapter 10, verses 13 through 16. We don't know who we are. Nobody's preaching who we are. We're not preaching nationality. We're not preaching culture. We're not preaching coming together. We're just preaching to say that we're better than the other preachers. Time out for that. That's right. We got to get these parasites out, physically and spiritually. By the way, prayerfully, you've been doing your parasite cleanse. I know I haven't been talking about it as much, but remember we said that the month of December we're trying to get ready, cleanse ourselves. All right. So, in all that now that we see, the Negro is actually defeated as well in 1491, alongside Muhammad, which shows you that as much as you might not like me saying this, right? Israel and Ishmael are fighting together. We can get into slave trade and stuff like that too, which is true as well. And enslaving yourself, sure, we can get into that as well. But at this point, Muhammad, the 12th, is on the throne. But there were Israelites fighting too, because they're fighting also for the Negro. But I need you to comprehend, we've kind of fast forwarded past the relevance of the Negro, because the Negro started being hated in the 1300s and enslaved in Portugal in the 1300s. The Dutch were already enslaving them as well, right? So you can look for evidence of that in the 1200s. And this is right after, in the 1100s, we just talked about William the Conqueror is now changing up what Christianity is, which was already kind of bad and off, but now he's really changing the game. So you see, you see the timeline? I need you to recognize how this is going on. Now, who is the Negro? You've been dancing around it. Many of you already know. But if you didn't catch it, the Negro is Israel. If you don't know this, if you go back to Portugal and you go back to Spain, from the 1300s up through 1550, maybe 1555, I could be off, maybe it's 1550, 1555 somewhere, but through the 1300s, early 1300s through 1550s, the Negro was considered to be, not by our books, by his story, by historical documentation, by what they say. The slave masters tell you this. They said that the Negro was swarthy in complexion. They said the Negro had locks in their hair. They said the Negro wore hoodies. They said the Negro would be in hoodies on the street corner, putting poetry over music. They said the Negro was very heavy into their faith and kept the Torah. They said the Negro was not was very much so into women, because in the European culture that they were in those places, it was okay to be bi, just hide it. Just don't get caught up. Don't get embarrassed by it. Like even back to the times of Rome, Julius Caesar, he swung both ways, and he was made fun of, but not because it was caught that he was sleeping with a man. They made fun of him because it was caught that he more than likely was the bottom. Mm-hmm. It's the truth. It's the truth. Right? It's a culture thing. So they made sure they said those things. They said we were into the Torah. They said that we prayed all the time. And they said we became problematic. Because when we became problematic because we didn't mix with other cultures. Not with other black folk. They said we didn't mix with other cultures. Not with other white folk. If you were in the kingdom, we didn't mix with you, which meant that we didn't marry into you. That means we didn't share wealth with you. And this became problematic. Because how do you get rich? You should be doing business. We should be sharing. Well, I mean, we'll do stuff when we're in your area and stuff, but we do stuff. We have businesses within our own. So we're a nation within ourselves. Does that remind you of anything? Does that remind you of like a Wilmington, North Carolina? Is it Rosewell? Rosewood, Florida? Does that remind you of a Tulsa, Oklahoma? Does that remind you of a Philadelphia, Pennsylvania? Does that remind you of Native Americans minding their own daggone business? Oh yeah. Before they went to Africa, there were Negroes, not Africans. Negroes. We know there's a difference between the two because they told us that when they went to Africa, they went first looking for Negroes, and when they could not find enough Negroes to keep the stuff going in their slave trade, they then went looking for Africans. Meaning that the Negro is not the same as one that has Negroid features. The Negroid features is based off of the Negro you're looking for. But if the African has anything in common with the Negro, they say they have Negroid features. If you are a Negro and you have features, you would just say it's Negro features. So once again, if I might go through some of those descriptions on that list, by the way, once again, it said that they were swarthy in skin complexion, okay? It did say, I missed one, it said that they had, they had beards and they didn't shave them. All right, okay. It said that they had locks in their hair, okay, all right. It said that they were very much into women. They didn't go back and forth. I'll vouch for myself. My wife came too. I'm not. I ain't doing all none of that. It said that they believed in Torah. Okay, I be preaching Torah and stuff. It said that they were, from time to time, I'll still put a hoodie on, something like that. I got a couple things hanging around here or there, whatever I might throw on every once in a while. Okay, I'm with you. It said that they'd be on street corners putting poetry over music. Now, I don't know necessarily be on the street corner, but I did used to do a little hip hop and stuff here and there. That sounded a lot like me. And some of you listening, it probably sounded a lot like you. The problem that they have with the Negro, once again, is that part of what we do is that we make sure that we take care of each other and we support our own, and that our dollar circulates in the community to where it touches each other hundreds of times. Well, let's say nowadays we would be happy with 50 to 60 times before it leaves the community. And that we didn't just accept any kind of thing or whatever. They forced us into Roman Catholicism. They threatened that they would off our children. And many persons, as much as Kanye and Waka Flocka and some others, would disagree with this while telling you that they support white men, but at the same time talking about that they would have fought against them somehow. And when I say support white men, you can support a so-called white person. I'm talking about they support white men as far as their value system, but somehow, some way, are like, I would have been the joker to jump off the boat. Okay. Right. I would have fought to the death. Okay, well, the persons that you are just about maybe you should respect you and honor your parents, because the ones that didn't jump off the boat, or the ones that didn't off themselves as Native Americans, guess what, sir? They're the reason you're here. You might want to get yourself together on that. But anyways, right? The first part of the chattel slave trade was done in Portugal and in Spain during what you call the Spanish Inquisition. The Spanish Inquisition was not just about any person who didn't know. The Spanish Inquisition was going into first those who are known, even back then, they were known as Yehudi, Yehudie, Yehovada, or what today you might call Judah. They went into the territories and the towns and the homes of those who were Judah, those who were Israel, those who were Negro, and they forced them into slavery by saying that they would off their children, no matter what age the child was, and they offed a few of them just to show them they would. So when they saw that they would do this, parents had to make a decision, and many of them decided that they would go ahead and, unfortunately, even though it's against the law, let's just be honest, it's against the law, but let's also be honest, man. If it's your child, what you gonna do? Not everybody is the Most High. Not everybody is Yechashvan. Not everybody is our Messiah. Not everybody is Elohim. That's why we needed him to do what a lot of us wouldn't do, to sacrifice your child. A lot of us wouldn't. I don't know what I would do, but I'm be honest. I don't think I could. I don't think I could look in my son's eyes for any of y'all jokers and be like, let him die so that we all might live. That's why you needed somebody better than I. And while I feel a little bit ashamed saying that, I also forgive myself for being a human being that is laced with sin and might not have the faith that he needs. But I'm just being honest. I as much as I love any of y'all, if you saying that Solomon to you, and as much as you might have done for Solomon, and I'm just keeping it a buck, I don't know if I can do that of my own child. When the Most High, right, this time had a son to be sacrificed, and there was no ram in the bush because the ram or the lamb, right, to be slain was one and the same as a child. He did something that I don't have the ability to do. That's why one of the reasons why I bow down and I worship him. I don't look for him or others like me to worship me, because I couldn't do that for you. I don't think I have it in me. It really shows me the sacrifice that was given for me and for you, if we be honest, right? So, anyways, they had to make a decision. Are we going to allow our children to be offed? Are we going to, go back into the truth? Are we going to allow our children to be offed? Or are we going to go back into the truth? Or I'm sorry, or are we going to stay with the truth? Or I'm sorry, excuse me. Are we going to allow our children to be off and stay in the truth? There we go. Are we going to allow our children to be off and stay in the truth? Or, do we let our children live and be enslaved? And many of them decided to let their children live and became enslaved. And they were forced, therefore, to be sent to the Caribbean, and many of them even stayed in the same place, but most would be sent to the Caribbean. The ones that were teenagers eventually would be sent, but up from like age 8 to 12, and then I guess if they were all right, they kind of kept them around to be slaves over there. And then those who who were little babies, they would be raised as slaves, and ultimately would raise up the children of the slave owners, right? So they would be trained as great Catholics, as great Roman Catholics, as great Christians, to do this. And they would live in places that, guess what? You think that this is a new thing from the 1900s for so-called Jewish persons, and then for everybody who wasn't, who wasn't white enough. But back then, they had something that today, and they knew back then as ghettos. Yeah. Ghettos are not a new thing. They had ghettos back then. And if you don't believe it, I believe you can still go to Portugal. I'm not sure about Spain, but you can still go to Portugal and be able to look at the ghetto. I'm not sure now look like they were finally maybe going to tear it down. I'm not sure if they ever did, but I'm pretty sure you can still go to Portugal. And if not, you could go and ask somebody where they used to be, and they'll take you at least to where it used to be. But it's known over there. Like, yeah, ghettos were over there. They were specifically for Negroes, and Negroes were considered to be Israel. They were considered to be Yehudi, Yehovada, Judah. They believed in the Torah. That's the beginning of the ghetto. The ghetto was part of the slave trade. The persons who were, right, they even put up rules and laws that said that nobody could start after 1550. Once again, 1550, 1555, somewhere in there. Give me a little bit of mercy if you can. But somewhere in there, that's where you get this whole thing of of you're not allowed to be called a Negro. And if somebody tries to call themselves a Negro, or you hear somebody is called a Negro, you have the right, even it's written in law, you have the right to take a knife and slash their face. Which means that you saw a bunch of Negroes, and you'll even, if you look up some pictures and stuff and you see Negroes with slash faces, it's not the same as the Germans with slash faces who were SS, who had those slash faces because they used to, that was a sign that they were always fencing each other. No, if you saw a Negro way back then with a painting of a slash face, he coming from a ghetto, he was a slave. And he had the audacity to say that he was a Negro, and that to them they knew that a Negro was considered to be an Israelite. Okay? So all these persons that are put in the slave trade and everything, they went for Negroes first, right? And then when they realized Negroes could do things in the sun that they could not do, then they kept on looking for Negroes, and they looked for Negroes also because there was this thing of hatred. There was this thing of, once again, you now can start getting into the what we were talking about with Queen Isabella and Ferdinand with the Crusades, right? Those black and brown people, they're not the chosen, and we're really the chosen as Christians, and da da da. All this stuff is going around Balaam doctrine, which is any doctrine to try and take away who Israel is. Any doctrine is supposed to be that does that. You're warned about it in Revelation. Any doctrine that's supposed to take away from who Israel really is, you're warned about it in Revelation chapter 2, verse 14. Any instruction, any doctrine, any Torah, because Torah also is synonymous with doctrine. Any doctrine that comes out and is there to be a stumbling block to Israel is as if Balak himself is still attacking us. And it should be taken seriously. It's a threat to the kingdom. If you really believe in the kingdom of heaven, then you should never let Israel be attacked like that. It's a nation. If you know about Badashat Kaf Chet, or Genesis chapter 28, you recognize very quickly that Israel is literally where heaven meets earth. If you're in the kingdom, then you're Israel. If you're not Israel, you're not in the kingdom. If you're not in the kingdom, you're not in Israel. That's what Israel is supposed to represent. So all these places that we were scattered to and things of that nature, now you must recognize it doesn't matter where you are from, it matters who you are from. We made that distinction. We talked about all these different things. We talked about how nations work and language. By the way, language and tongue are synonymous with nation as well. So what you speak is synonymous with the language. That's why if you speak the language, you should be of the nation. If you be of the nation, then you should also speak the language. You should live the language. You should not just talk it, but you should live what you speak. For if you speak it, but you don't live it, then you're a hypocrite as well, right? Right? So if you can't treat your brother or sister correctly, you know what I'm saying? Then you can speak all this stuff all you want, but you're still not Israel. You're still not kingdom. That's the way it operates. It's a nation, right? Okay. So this specific nation, not just so-called black persons, not just so-called Jewish persons, no, this specific nation. What is a nation, by the way? Your daddy is this, your mama is this. That's who you're from. And if they are not from this is why the Bible says, he who will put his mother or father before me is not worthy. Christ said that, right? He who puts his mother and father before him is not worthy of the kingdom of heaven. Why? Because if you will say you're more from your mother or father than you are from Christ, then you're not part of the nation. Because who you are from is more important than where you are from. That seems harsh, but it's the word. Is that true? Is anybody, right? We're getting ready to land the plane. We're getting ready to land the plane on the question. But do you catch that? This is why it says these things. It's not saying these things randomly. These are universal statements as far as if you're in the kingdom. These are kingdom-centric, Yah-centric statements, right? Lawful statements. If you will put your mother and father before him, then you are of them. Let them be your king. Let them be your royalty. Let them be your nation. But don't say that you are part of your mother and father. See, this is why we have to see, watch this. Just a real quick thing, even with the racism thing, right? We haven't really talked too much about that today. Praise y'all, because I know somebody wouldn't even listen to this at all if I was talking about it as much as we probably could have. But Holy Spirit led it properly. And thank you, Holy Spirit, for leading us properly. Watch this. Even when you talk about racism and somebody says, well, I didn't start racism. Nobody said you did. But if you will not denounce your mother or father or any source that you come from, if you will not denounce the source of racism, they are still, remember, Abba, Father means source. If you would not denounce the Father, the source of racism, because you feel more connected to them than of the nation of, right, the kingdom or the nation of Israel whom you say you serve, then my brother, my sister, I don't care what your skin color is, if you will not denounce the source of some of the stuff you're getting it from, then guess what? You're not Israel. You're not kingdom. You're not of the nation. This nation, that's the rules, that's the laws, that's what our king decrees. It's not because Pastor Kofi's all that or I hate you or whatever. It's because the king over me, who's the reason that I'm even sent. If he doesn't send me to say it, I can't even say it. If he doesn't authorize me to say it, even if I want to say it, I have to shut my mouth. There's a lot of stuff that I'd love to say, but I'm not authorized to say it. So I'm telling you, the king says, if you don't denounce wicked sources that you come from, then you can't be of him because you put those sources above him. So finally, my brethren, when it comes to this, well then, what is Babylon? How are we escaping? Babylon is Daniel chapter 2. It's a continued conversation. Babylon, Medes and Persians, Greeks, Romans, Christians, they're the same statue of Daniel chapter 2. Right? Babylon, Daniel chapter 7, lion with wings, right? Medes and the Persians, bear hunched over. The Greeks, four-headed leopard. Rome and then Christianity, iron mixed with clay. And Christianity all put together is one diverse beast, right? 10 toes or 10 horns, 10 nations that we're going to fight against Roman Catholicism. 3 horns plucked out by one coming up. The Bishop of Rome uses the help from Eastern Rome to be able to make sure that they pluck them out and wipe out 3 of the nations. The other 7 nations backed up and said, hey, we'll do whatever you say because we want to survive. And now you have one pope that still exists today. You didn't call him the pope back then. You just called him the Bishop of Rome. Right? That's 538, I believe, 538 AC. Some of you would say 538 CE, whatever. Same year, though. Right? We know this stuff to be true. So these things happen. And so now we as Yehudashah, we've been scattered. But now we're coming back into being a nation. And we're coming out of that statue, out of the world. And if you know Daniel chapter 2, it talks about that rock that's being formed. Right? That rock being formed is getting ready to go ahead and it's picking up steam and it's getting bigger and bigger and it's going to hit the statue and the rock will not even have a crack, a dent, anything in it. It will not lose any of itself. It will not lose any mass while utterly destroying this statue, this dream, this vision that men have of themselves, which really is something that's just simply them making sure that they're uplifting the devil, right? Using even Christianity and other means of spirituality to try and go ahead and realize that, get us to not discover that they're that second beast, right? They're really that second beast. We know about the, see, there's not 3 beasts. I guess if you want to call them 3 beasts, I acknowledge the first one. That's what the Bible calls them, right? The devil, the serpent. Then out of the water, which is his people who follow his words, right? He sent his people to try and find us, Israel. Right? He couldn't get to us because we finally did what we were supposed to and use the clay, right? Yahweh's the potter, we are the clay. And we use our culture, we use our nation, we make sure that we are separate and we're in the wilderness. We went into the wilderness because the word wild there is actually referring to anything that is not of civilization. So we're not of the world. So we went out where we were supposed to. We actually hadn't done what we were supposed to. The water or the people of the devil who follow out of his mouth, follow whatever he says, were spit or directed to come looking for us, but they can't come for us because we have put up the clay. Since we have put up the clay, they turn their attention now, right, with the fallen angels who are the serpent's tail, right, the fallen angels in the water. Now they turn their attention back to try and drown or to take out those who are the remnant that are left over, who have an opportunity to be able to come over, but we got to stay in position separate from the world so they have a place to be able to come over. We got to have a drawbridge out so when they need to come over that moat, they can run in and we can put the door and keep the wiles of the enemy back, right? We can resist the devil and let him flee, but those who want to flee the devil will still have a way to be able to come and join us where we are in the kingdom, right? And so Revelation 13 then tells us that out of the water, since they can't really get rid of us the way they'd like to, they designed a government, a beast that looks like the devil in many different ways and follows his ways, designed by the people who worship the devil. That's why you're dealing with so many different issues in the government, because those who are in government, what we call government today, because those who are governing in governance, they are actually literally using demonic tactics to come against you. And if you ever catch them and you ever speak against it, then what they do is they send something called the second beast at you, right? The second beast. What is the second beast? I know we're over time. I apologize, y'all. But I promise you, we closing for real, for real. The plane is landed. We descended. Put your seatbelts on. Right? So the second, so it's Q&A day. We go longer anyways, but I promise we end it, right? So the second beast, what is the design of the second beast? The second beast is supposed to come and have horns like a lamb, like a male lamb. But when you listen to its voice, it sounds like a beast. It sounds like a serpent. It hisses. It sounds like the devil. It sounds like the government. So when you hear somebody preaching and teaching things that match government, or preaching and teaching things that match those that would enslave us, or preaching and teaching things that match what the Bible says is not correct, or preaching and teaching things but still trying to use them to govern us, you must realize that that's not even the first beast, that's the second beast. And it says the second beast is designed specifically to uplift the government, to uplift the beast, to be super patriotic, to make sure that the things that have really divided and conquered us are now the things that we're trying to uplift and act like that's what it was supposed to be the whole time. Right? And they're doing it because ultimately they follow the people, the water, the corporations, and everybody who's paying into them, flowing into them, who come out of what? The devil. They are the devil's water. They are the devil's people. That water there, once again, in Revelation chapter 12, it represents people, a nation, but this is a nation who follows the devil. They came out of the devil's mouth, right? They came out of the fallen angels' decrees. This is why Paul said, as we were talking about in our Galatians, we're going to pick it up, Galatians chapter 2 tonight in our live session. But last night, if you're with us in Galatians chapter 1, we said, what is the purpose of Galatians? Galatians is written specifically for what purpose? What purpose is it written for? It's written because Paul had taught the truth. He left, and then when persons had an opportunity to seep their own stuff in or to try and come in outside, persons who were new in the truth were allowing anything to come in. And Paul says, stop listening to that. If it's not what we preach, if it's not our culture, if it's not our kingdom, if it's not what Jehovah says, then it's not righteous. Stop listening to it. You're going to get yourself in trouble. That's what Paul said last night. Those of you who were on with us, if you don't know what I'm talking about, go look at the recording. That's line for line, bar for bar, flow for flow. Right? That's what the rest of Galatians is about. So when persons even try to say, well, Paul's talking about being against the law, Paul is not talking about that. Paul says, I gave you law, I gave you commandments, I told you about this, I told you about Passover, I told you about that. How is it that I just left? He says, what's the word he used? Not he's amazed, not he's perplexed. He marvels. He said, I marvel at how quickly y'all allow somebody to come in with something false that's not of our nation. So when we're coming together as a nation, that's part of the goal, is to make sure we actually get back to righteousness. Oh, no problem, sis. I'm just saying, if you did get a chance, look it up when you get a chance. But that's what it is. Yeah, we got to bridge that gap, right? So now when we talk about the second Exodus, everybody's talking about the second Exodus. Yes, it's really just coming out of the world. The second Exodus is coming out of the world and being a nation. Wherever your foot treads, come on, Bible warriors, Bible scholars. Wherever our feet tread, it belongs to us. Those who are in the kingdom and following the law and following the word and doing what we're supposed to. Wherever our feet tread, it belongs to us, because Israel is where heaven meets earth, according to Genesis 28. If you don't get the reference point, if you don't get the reference point, you probably heard of something called Jacob's ladder, which I know persons want to have a conversation about your DNA, right? And homiletically, and persons want to have a conversation about your spine, and Jacob's ladder in the Bible specifically is referring to when Jacob and Esau have just had their little dispute, right? Jacob now has the birthright and the blessing, the birthright, he leaves and he heads, by command of his father and his mother, he's told to go ahead and get a wife of Syria. They're afraid that he's going to get a wife that's similar to Esau's, right? Esau has been marrying outside of his community. He's got 2 wives now. He's going to go down to Kemet and get a 3rd one, right? They want him to get a wife that's like Rebecca and has the cultures and the quality of the wives of Abraham. He goes, and yes, I said wives because after Sarah died, Abraham does remarry. He goes sent over to back to Syria. That's where you get Padan Aram. That's where you get Aramic, right? But they were not Aramaic. Aramic is some of those who were in Aram. Aram is basically pretty much Syrian. But remember, Abraham was speaking the language of all creation, which means Isaac is speaking the language of all creation. Avda, right? If you know Jubilee chapter 12, right? Avda, Hebrew, Ivrit, Paleo Hebrew, etc., is considered to be the language of all creation in our culture. So he's speaking Hebrew. His father tried to deny the Hebrew roots because his father and his father's fathers were having issues and they were starting to get away from the truth. Abraham denounced them and got back in the truth, right? So they're speaking Avda, they're speaking Hebrew, they're speaking what their nation speaks, they're speaking righteousness. And so when Jacob is sent to Padan Aram, right, he's sent back to Syria. But he on his way that when he gets there, he gets to Aram, which is where you get this whole Aramic, and it's not even the modern Aramaic persons that they say it is, but you're taught all this weird stuff. So they try to throw this stuff at us. That's why we got to know our culture. But he's sent to Padan Aram, to Syria, to find a Syrian wife because the Syrian wives have the same culture as far as wives are concerned as we do as Hebrews, right? That's why he's sent there by his father Isaac. And so Jacob, who is not Israel yet, but will become Israel, he goes into sleep and he has a dream. And in this dream, there is a ladder. And the ladder goes all the way up to heaven. And going up the ladder are messengers or angels. And going down from heaven to his brain, basically, to the earth, are angels. So whatever is coming down from heaven is being done up to earth, up from earth to heaven. And everything that's done from earth to heaven is being done from heaven to earth, right? Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done in earth in the same manner that is done in heaven. That's what's happening in his dream. He had slept on some rocks, right? On rocks. He didn't have pillows with him. He was on the run. He was rushing. And he was trying to get the will of his father and do what he was told and get out of there. He falls asleep on these rocks. He wakes up and he stacks the rocks on top of each other as pillars. And he realizes in the dream he had seen that all of his children were going to inhabit the land that he was in. And so he makes a promise and says, I know that this is the door, right? He says, I know that this pillar will basically represent the door to where heaven meets earth. And he says, I know this is where my children will be. And he says, as long as the Most High be with me, I will always do what the Most High says. I will follow him. This is Jacob's ladder. So in essence, he was the one who says, if you are my child, you are where heaven meets earth. So the goal is to get back to being a nation where we live together and where heaven meets earth. That is our responsibility. That is the one thing we don't like to teach or we don't like to stand on. And we also are afraid of it because so many persons will try to make us feel like we're racist or so-called reverse racist for saying so. Alrighty? Okay. So that's the end of the Q&A for today. Thank you for the sister who asked the question. Great questions by all the last couple of days. Thank you for being on. So we'll continue this series. We're going to continue it through December 25th, not because December 25th needs to be celebrated, but because the live Christmas will be the last lie we revisit in this series. Once again, the series is called Reversing the Curse, means revisiting the lie. We appreciate you all. Thank you so much for being on with us. Once again, happy Hanukkah for those who are celebrating. We might do one thing this year, it's not planned out, but we might do one thing where we do a little bit of lighting of the candles, together. So we'll see how we come about on that. If it's not something that we can plan out or whatever, or make sure everybody has off that day or something, we can at least, we'll do something where you can see the recording. We'll do something like that. But we've already talked about Hanukkah and some of the lies with Hanukkah and the truth about where it comes from. So feel free to look that recording up. I believe we went over that on Monday in the Rising. So feel free to look at that recording. Thank you for being on with us from different platforms, whether you join us from IG, from the podcast, from Clapper, from Facebook, YouTube, TikTok. If you're joining us live, if you're watching us later on, whatever the case might be, we appreciate you so much. Thank you for finding us. I know they've been making it extremely difficult to find us. You're not even getting notifications and stuff now, all that. But thank you for staying true, and thank you for showing up even for the And I'm not saying this to be mean. Some of you are catching this later on. All of us are going through different things. I'm just saying for those who are able to be the faithful few right now, I want to let you know I really appreciate you. We're all going through. I promise you. If I tell the truth, we praise God. We're not like red flag. I mean, I feel like it's red flag, but I know what it is to be like, hey, you know, trying to make sure the heat gonna stay on, the electricity stay on, trying to keep the water running. It's difficult time for many of us. So I appreciate you even showing up, and I want to let you know that God's still with you and that we're still praying for you. And thank you for your prayers that you've given back. And I appreciate the little bit of conversations we've been having here and there with a lot of you. I've been better with some of that and voicing some things and making sure we had some things off before they become problematic and things. But we're working and we're working towards it. And I even, some of the stuff I was hearing on prayer service yesterday, tears my heart out some, to know that some of you have to go through it, but God would not allow any of this stuff to be put on us if we could not bear it. And I know that sounds cliche. Sometimes, though, His word, no matter how cliche it might sound, His word is still true. So just want to put that out there. I love you all and I thank you. We're going to get ready to do our shout out. If you've never done a shout out with us before, just come over to TikTok and join us. Or and if you're on YouTube or Facebook, you should be able to see how to come over there in the description. If you're looking for us on YouTube, you can type in the same thing, or sorry, if you're with us on Clapper right now, you can type in the same thing that you see on Clapper, and basically get it there. By the way, we're probably going to start trying to use Twitch as well, which I know for a lot of persons for the younger community. So that's going to be interesting. See how to find it. We might use Twitch or even Periscope. Periscope kind of old. Does Periscope even exist? I think it still exists. But whatever their live thing is over there on X now, whatever they use, we're going to probably use a couple of those. Because to be honest, we tried the Clapper thing. We still use it for certain things. We still get a lot of persons who like content that we upload, but the live sessions, Clapper's not necessarily built for us. So the live sessions, we don't really get as much, bang for our buck, let's say, as we would in other places. So we're continuing to do what y'all has said, but thank you, everybody. We appreciate you. Thank you for spending some time with us and hanging out. We hope and pray that this word, barak, we pray that once again, sisters, don't forget tonight, 7 p.m. New York time, women's meeting before the live session where we'll go back into Galatians, starting at chapter 2, verse 1. That'll be at 8 p.m. New York time. So women's meeting at 7 p.m. New York time, then followed by our live session. And don't forget, tomorrow we have our watch party and we have our men's meeting, amongst all the other stuff that's the norm for us as well. December 27th is coming up. That's our Women in Red service. And then December 31st at 10 p.m. New York time is going to be our watch night service. By the way, we sent out assignments and stuff like that to ministerial staff. We're going to ask that you guys make sure that you are keeping with the time. I will try not to do it in an embarrassing fashion, but because we're going to do it just for 2 hours, including the music, which means it'll be shorter than that. That means if you start going over time, or you hit like overtime about a minute or so, I would probably have to come on and be like, it's your time. I don't want to be like that though. So, just asking for all of us, including there be other persons who are going to be helping out in great ways as well, real quick here or there. Everybody who's going to be on there, we're going to ask for you to make sure you stay within a certain time so we can make sure we pray our way into the new year. If not, somebody might not get to do their assignment or not do it fully, or, may not be able to, be on at all, which would be unfortunate. So we look forward to all these things going on. Let's continue to hashtag finish strong in this year where we have created hashtag a safe place, and we shall continue to create that so that next year we can really focus in on hashtag we be the nation. Alrighty. So love you much. Thank you for being on all the different platforms. I really, really do. We hope and pray that this bless you once again, our Barak, you and your house. And if you'd like to stick around for the shout out, for us to give you a little bit more information and also to kind of do something we think here is kind of cool that we do, then we'd love to have you stick around and be part of that. So thank you, everybody. We appreciate you. We honor you. Hopefully all continues to be well. And as always, we give our honor and praise to the Most High. We give our honor and praise to Him from Wife, the Honorable Maya. Thank you to the moderators, ministerial staff, SOC, Lottie Dottie, everybody. And as always, remember that you are loved. You're necessary. You're majestic. You're fearfully and wonderfully made. And you, which is all of us working together, will be the reason why people who are in this system no longer have to be of it. Shalom, take care. If I don't see you before this evening or during this evening, early Shabbat Shalom to you. And may Yah favor you if you keep Shabbat during this time. Amen. For everybody else,